Hi guys! Tonight we find ourselves at the mercy of nature's fury wrapped in a blanket of ice and snow. A storm like no other. Its fury hurls at you with 100 miles per hour winds, the kind that strip the trees bare and threaten to swallow you whole. The freezing gusts cut through your clothes, biting your skin, and the snow falls thick and fast, coating everything in its path. It's the kind of storm where survival seems like a distant dream, where even the smallest lapse in judgment can lead to disaster. But somehow there's an ancient way to survive this kind of deadly winter. A set of skills passed down through generations, taught by those who lived in harmony with the land, not in defiance of it. You probably won't survive this, but those who came before you did, and they left behind a legacy of wisdom that allows you to face this storm with a fighting chance. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you feel like it, drop your location and the time there in the comments below. Let's see where you're listening from. Now dim the lights and let's step into the story. It's a cruel, unforgiving winter one that tests every fibre of your being. As the snow piles up, the cold presses harder against your chest and the wind screeches through the trees like a hungry predator. The land once teeming with life is now an expanse of white where nothing stirs except for the wind and your own breath, coming out in quick, visible puffs of mist. It's hard to tell where the earth ends and the sky begins, and every step you take seems like an eternity. The snow drifts higher and higher as you trudge forward. You can barely see ahead, but you know the landscape well enough. You've been here before in storms like this. Your ancestors survived winters like these ones that seemed impossible to endure. There's a rhythm to how you move, how you read the land, how you listen to the wind, how you trust the signs of the natural world around you. It's not a question of fighting against nature. It's about understanding it, respecting it, and knowing exactly how to bend it to your will. As you push forward, the temperature drops, and it feels as though your bones themselves are being encased in ice. The world around you is still quiet, the kind of quiet that fills your ears with the deafening sound of your own heartbeat. It's a feeling you know well, one that your ancestors would have recognized. Historians still argue whether Native Americans truly understood the deep spiritual connection they had to the land, or if it was simply a matter of survival. But either way, they knew how to read the signs. They knew that a storm like this could wipe out entire communities in a matter of hours, and they had developed ways to not just survive, but thrive even in the harshest conditions. As the storm intensifies, you spot the first signs of shelter, an old familiar grove of trees. You don't know how far away it really is, but you've come to trust your instincts. These trees, twisted and gnarled from years of battling the elements, offer the kind of protection only nature can provide. You head toward them, your legs growing heavier with every step. The wind roars around you, biting at your exposed skin, but the thought of shelter keeps you moving. And then, as you finally reach the grove, you find a tree that has been hollowed out by time and weather. It's not much, but it will keep you out of the worst of the storm. You duck inside, crouching low, your breath coming in sharp, painful gasps. The wind shrieks outside, but here in this small makeshift shelter you can hear yourself think again. The snow piles up against the tree, sealing you in, and for a moment it feels like you're the only person left in the world. This is the key to surviving storms like these, the knowledge that the land has already provided everything you need. The shelter here wasn't built by your hands, but it's the kind of refuges that has been used by countless generations before you. The trees have offered shelter in times of need, and the land provides not just what you need to survive, but what you need to thrive. It's about knowing where to find shelter, how to read the wind, and how to use the landscape to your advantage. But even in the relative safety of the tree, the cold still gnaws at your skin. You can't stay here forever. You need fire. You need warmth. So you reach into your pack, feeling for the familiar tools you have always carried with you. A small flint stone, a piece of dried bark, and a bit of kindling. You know exactly how to use these. You've done it countless times before. You strike the flint, creating sparks, and catch the dried bark breathing life into the small fire. It flickers and sputters at first, but soon it catches and the warmth spreads through your body. The fire is small, but in a world like this, it's more than enough. As the fire grows, you lean back against the rough bark of the tree, letting the warmth seep into your muscles. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the rhythmic crackling of the flames soothe you. The storm rages on outside, but you're safe for now. You think back to the stories your elders told, stories of survival passed down through generations. They told you of the ways Native Americans survived deadly winter storms, of how they used everything at their disposal to stay alive. You remember how they would build shelters that blended seamlessly with nature, how they would use the wind to their advantage, how they could tell when a storm was coming simply by reading the skies. It wasn't magic, it wasn't luck, it was knowledge, a deep, intimate understanding of the world around them. Native Americans didn't just live on the land, they lived with it. They knew the rhythm of the seasons, the way the snow would fall, how the wind would shift. And they passed that knowledge down generation after generation, ensuring that even the harshest storms couldn't wipe them out. In the flickering glow of your fire, you remember the importance of warmth. Without it, you would freeze within hours. But warmth is more than just the fire you've built. It's the knowledge, the understanding that this cold is not your enemy, it's simply a part of the world you inhabit. The cold can kill you if you let it, but if you respect it, understand it and prepare for it, you can survive. Your ancestors did, and so will you. The storm continues outside, its fury unabated, but you're not afraid. You are prepared. You've survived this storm before. And with the lessons of those who came before you, you'll survive it again. The wind howls again, rattling the trees, shaking their branches with a force that makes you second guess whether the shelter you've found is truly enough. You listen carefully as the storm outside picks up. The wind seems to take on a life of its own, shrieking and swirling, with a mind that's impossible to predict. Yet in its chaotic song, there's a subtle rhythm. If you listen closely enough, you can hear the pattern, the way the gusts come and go, the way the snow seems to fall in waves. The storm is fierce, but there's a way to move through it if you know how to read it. It's in moments like this, when the storm seems to be at its peak, that you realise the immense advantage your ancestors had in surviving the worst winter storms. They didn't rely on modern technology. They didn't have the luxury of heated homes or insulated clothing. Instead, they had an understanding of the world that was far more profound, more connected to nature than we could ever imagine today. And that connection was something they passed down through generation. Historians still argue whether Native Americans' deep connection to the land was purely practical, or whether it also had spiritual significance. But one thing is certain, their knowledge was passed down not just as a survival tool, but as a way of life. This wasn't just about enduring the cold, it was about living with it, finding peace in the storm and thriving in an environment that would overwhelm most people. You know that survival isn't just about being tough or being prepared, it's about understanding the land, knowing how to predict its moods, how to react when the storm hits, and how to make use of every single resource at your disposal. The trees, the snow, the animals, they're all part of a greater system, one that requires you to pay attention, to listen, and to act with purpose. As you settle into the shelter of the tree, the fire crackles softly, filling the small space with its warmth. You're not alone here, though. The stories of those who came before you echo in your mind, each one a lesson, a survival technique passed down through the ages. You remember how your ancestors would build fire pits in sheltered areas, ensuring they were always protected from the full force of the storm. They knew that a steady fire was the key to surviving a winter storm. It wasn't just about warmth, it was about keeping your spirits high, about creating a small, controlled environment in the midst of chaos. The warmth of the fire wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, spiritual. It was the light in the dark, a beacon of hope that kept despair at bay. Fire, of course, wasn't the only survival tool your ancestors had. You think back to the techniques they used to stay warm during the bitter cold. The clothing they wore, crafted from animal hides, was far from a luxury. It was a necessity finely tuned over generations of trial and error. The hides provided a barrier between their skin and the deadly cold, but it wasn't just the material that made them effective. It was how the clothing was designed to trap body heat, to keep it close to the skin while also allowing for movement. Each piece had a purpose, each stitch, each layer had been honed to perfection over time. The clothing your ancestors wore wasn't just functional, it was a symbol of their ability to adapt to thrive in an unforgiving environment. As the storm rages on outside, you recall how Native Americans used every part of the animals they hunted, how no part of the creature went to waste. The skins were used for clothing, of course, but also for shelter, for blankets, for bags, and for tools. Even the bones were utilised to craft weapons and utensils. It wasn't wasteful, it wasn't haphazard. Every part had a role to play, and every item had been crafted with care, with an understanding of how to make the most out of the land's offerings. This wasn't survival in the sense of merely getting by, it was survival through respect and understanding, survival through ingenuity and reverence for the world around them. The wind seems to quiet for a moment, and you take the opportunity to step outside for a breath of fresh air. The snow stings as it hits your face, but the cold, sharp air is invigorating. You know that if you're going to survive this storm, you need to keep moving to stay active, to keep your blood flowing. The fire may offer warmth, but you can't sit still for too long. In these conditions, staying in one place for too long is dangerous. Your body will lose heat far quicker than you think. So you push forward, feeling the crunch of snow beneath your boots with each step. The wind picks up again, but it's a steady, familiar rhythm now. You know it's coming, and you brace yourself against it. You've trained for this. You've watched others survive this. It's not luck that keeps them alive, it's knowledge. It's a deep understanding of how to read the signs, how to prepare for the worst, and how to stay calm when the world feels like it's falling apart around you. As you walk, you notice the subtle patterns in the snow, the way the snow has drifted against the tree trunks, the way it piles up in certain places while leaving others clear. You've seen this before. This is your map, your guide. The snow itself is a tool, a resource, just like any other. The way it piles up tells you where the wind has been strongest, where the shelter is best, and where the dangers lie. The snow isn't just an obstacle to overcome, it's a map that guides you. A map that shows you the path forward if you know how to read it. Historians still argue whether Native Americans had a formal system of mapping, or whether they simply relied on memory and experience, but one thing is clear, they understood their land like no one else. The land was their map, and they knew it better than anyone. They knew the rhythm of the seasons, the subtle changes in the wind, and how to use these to their advantage. The storm continues to rage, but you feel a sense of calm wash over you. The wind is no longer something to fear, it's simply like a part of the world you inhabit. You've learnt to read its signs, to predict its movements, and to adapt accordingly. In this storm, you're not just surviving, you're thriving. You're living with the storm, using it to your advantage, just as your ancestors did. You return to your shelter, the small fire still crackling softly. It's a steady presence in the storm, a symbol of resilience, of life amidst chaos. You sit back watching the flames dance, and you realise that you've learned something vital tonight. Survival isn't just about enduring, it's about adapting, about understanding the world around you, and using that understanding to thrive. The storm will pass, it always does, and when it does you'll be ready, just like those who came before you. The storm hasn't relented, but inside your shelter the fire continues to provide warmth, its crackling sound filling the silence. You've settled into a rhythm now, not just of survival, but of coexistence with the elements. The wind is a constant presence, a reminder of how small and fragile human life can be in the face of nature's fury. But that fragility doesn't necessarily mean you're doomed. It means that to survive, you must understand that nature doesn't need to be conquered. It only needs to be respected. Native Americans learned this lesson long ago. They knew that survival wasn't about dominating the land, it was about knowing when to fight, when to work with nature, and when to simply yield to it. That knowledge didn't come easily. It was learned through hardship, passed down through generations who had to endure the very storms you are facing now. Their ability to adapt to such extreme conditions wasn't just about brute strength or luck, it was about an intimate understanding of the land and its moods. You begin to think of the many techniques they used to endure the storms. The fire you've built is a good example, but it's far from the only tool they had in their arsenal. The use of firewood, for instance, wasn't a mere matter of gathering sticks and lighting a match. It required knowledge of which wood would burn hottest, which would last the longest, and how to arrange it for maximum heat efficiency. You can't just throw any wood onto the fire and expect it to keep you warm. Some woods burn fast, others slow, and each type of wood has its own rhythm. Your ancestors knew this, of course, and they passed down the knowledge of which trees to seek out, which woods to gather, and how to prepare them. For the Native Americans, fire wasn't just a luxury, it was a necessity. They knew how to start fires in the worst conditions, with the wind whipping around them and the snow coming down in thick, unforgiving layers. A fire in the snow wasn't just a source of heat, it was a beacon, a lifeline that could guide them through the darkest, most dangerous nights. When you think about it, the fire is symbolic of something deeper than just survival. It represents the knowledge passed down through generations, the wisdom that allows one to endure to stay warm not just in body but in spirit. And then there's the shelter. While fire is essential for warmth, shelter is equally important for surviving under the brutal winter storms. You've seen the way your ancestors built their homes, temporary structures, designed to provide protection from the elements. Whether it was the simple yet effective snow shelters, or the more permanent dwellings like the longhouses or teepees, the design was always focused on survival. These shelters were constructed with the elements in mind, designed to trap heat, to block the wind, and to keep the snow at bay. There was no room for mistakes when building a shelter. A single gap could lead to disaster, and every part of the structure had to be carefully crafted and placed to ensure maximum protection. But the shelters weren't just about keeping out the cold, they were also about preserving energy. They were built with the understanding that in extreme cold, every bit of warmth needed to be conserved. Even the placement of the shelter was chosen carefully. It had to be located in a place that was shielded from the wind, but also able to gather warmth from the sun when it rose. The roofs were often designed with sloped angles to shed snow, preventing it from piling up and adding unnecessary weight to the structure. Each detail, no matter how small, was part of a larger survival strategy. These shelters weren't just physical protection, they also served as a space for the community to gather to share warmth not just from the fire but from each other. They were places of connection, places where stories were told, traditions were passed down, and bonds were strengthened. In many ways, the survival of the group was as much about the strength of their community as it was about the strength of their shelters or fires. It's easy to forget how much the cold can isolate you when you're not in the middle of it. The chill, when it seeps deep into your bones, can make the world feel impossibly vast and lonely. But in these shelters, the warmth was shared not just physically but emotionally. It was this sense of unity, this shared warmth, that helped keep people going through the darkest winters. And it was this sense of community that made survival possible, even when the storm seemed unrelenting. As you sit by the fire, you realize that this sense of community is one of the most powerful survival tools your ancestors had. They didn't survive alone. They survived together. Whether they were hunting, building shelters, or simply enduring the cold, they did it as a group. There was no room for individualism in a winter storm. Every person had a role to play. Every skill had a purpose. It wasn't just about fighting the storm. It was about working together, relying on each other, and making sure that everyone had what they needed to survive. And this is where the Native American approach to survival diverges from what we often think of when it comes to winter storms. Survival isn't just about being tough. It's about understanding that you're not alone, that there's strength in unity, and that survival is about more than just enduring the cold. It's about creating a space where everyone can find warmth, both physically and emotionally. As the storm outside begins to roar again, you feel the wind pick up, but this time you don't feel the same level of fear. You've come to understand that the wind isn't something to fight. It's something to acknowledge, to work with, and to use as a guide. It tells you which direction to go, which areas are more sheltered, and where the risks lie. Your ancestors learned to read the wind like this, and so you do too. You know the storm is fierce, but you also know that it's not invincible. With the right knowledge, the right skills and the right community, you'll not only survive, it will make you stronger. The wind continues to howl outside, but you've found your rhythm. You've learned the language of the storm, and you're no longer afraid. You're ready. The storm is relentless, but your shelter offers a small reprieve from the chaos outside. The The fire crackles with a promise of warmth, though you know that warmth, like the land itself, is fleeting. The storm will pass eventually, but it might leave a path of destruction in its wake, a reminder of nature's power over even the strongest of us. But as you sit by the fire, you realise that the storm is as much a part of survival as anything else. It's not just the cold, the wind or the snow that will determine whether you live or die. It's how you adapt, how you use the resources at your disposal, and how well you understand the nature of your surroundings. This wasn't lost on the Native Americans. They had an innate understanding of how the elements could shape their world, and they didn't just survive the winter storms, they lived with them. From the blankets of fur to the tightly woven shelters, every element of their existence was designed with the harsh realities of winter in mind. The structures they built weren't just shelters from the cold. They were a symbol of how they understood and respected the power of nature. They didn't try to bend nature to their will, they learned to live in harmony with it, accepting its fury as a part of life. Historians still debate whether the deep spiritual connection many Native American tribes had with the land was a purely symbolic relationship, or whether it played a more practical role in their survival. Some argue that their reverence for the earth, the wind and the snow was rooted in real, tangible survival techniques passed down through generations. Others suggest that it was more a matter of worldview, a way to understand the world around them through a spiritual lens. Either way, one thing is clear. The Native Americans had a profound understanding of their environment, a connection to the land that gave them the knowledge they needed to endure even the harshest conditions. You take a deep breath, the air cold and sharp as it fills your lungs. The shelter is small, but it's enough. You've come to realise that survival in a storm like this isn't just about finding a place to hide. It's about adapting to your surroundings, using what nature gives you to stay safe, and making sure that every choice you make is a calculated one. The land provides, but only if you know how to use it. As you sit by the fire, your mind drifts to the knowledge passed down through generations. The skills and wisdom of your ancestors weren't just about surviving the cold, they were about thriving within it. They knew how to use the snow, the trees and the wind to guide them. They knew which animals to track, which herbs to gather, and how to keep their bodies warm, even when the temperature dropped to bone-chilling levels. The snow itself, they realised, could offer clues to survival, how deep it was, how much had fallen, and which areas were more dangerous than others. One quirky tidbit comes to mind. Native Americans learned to use the very snow that could kill them to their advantage. They were experts at reading the snow's patterns, the way it settled against tree trunks, or how it clung to the landscape. They didn't just walk through the snow, they understood it, reading the signs it left behind. The way it drifted in the wind, how it piled in certain areas, and how it could create dangerous conditions in others. They knew that the wind would blow the snow into certain patterns, and they could predict the safest paths based on these patterns. The snow wasn't a foe to be feared, it was a tool, a resource they could use. You sit back feeling the warmth of the fire as it pushes back the cold. The storm outside howls louder now, but it doesn't seem so threatening. You know that the snow will continue to fall, that the wind will continue to blow, but you also know that you have the knowledge, the tools and the resources to handle whatever comes next. You remember the stories of survival, that your elders told stories about how the land itself was a teacher, how the winds, the snow, and the trees were all there to guide you if you knew how to listen. In a sense, survival wasn't about fighting against the storm. It was about learning to be in tune with it, to move with it, instead of trying to resist it. Your ancestors didn't just survive because they had stronger bodies or better equipment. They survived because they knew how to read the land, how to use every element of nature to their advantage. They understood that every storm, every challenge was a lesson to be learned, a piece of knowledge to be passed down to the next generation. It wasn't just about gathering firewood or making a shelter. It was about understanding the wind's direction, the type of trees that would offer the best protection, the way the snow would fall in certain areas. It was about knowing when to move, when to stop, and when to trust the land to lead you. It was about creating a space of warmth, not just with fire, but with community, a place where everyone could come together and share their knowledge, their strength and their will to survive. You think back to the fire you've built, its warmth enveloping you in a comforting embrace. The fire, just like the shelters and the tools your ancestors crafted, isn't just a means of survival. It's a symbol of connection. The warmth isn't just for your body, it's for your spirit. It's the light in the darkness, the steady glow that reminds you that no matter how fierce the storm, you're not alone. It's said that Native Americans didn't just survive the storm, they learned to work with it, to predict it, and to use its power. They had the wisdom to understand that nature wasn't something to fear. It was something to live with, to work alongside. This respect for the land wasn't just a cultural norm, it was a survival strategy. And it's something that has been passed down through generations, from those who endured the cold and the storms to those who now sit by the fire telling their stories. As the storm outside rages on, you realize that you have everything you need to survive. The knowledge is there, passed down through the ages stored within you. It's not just about fighting the storm, it's about becoming a part of it. It's about listening to the wind, reading the snow, and finding strength in the community around you. The wind picks up once more, and with it the unmistakable sound of the storm's fury. It howls through the trees, rattling the branches as it spins snow into the air, creating a swirling blizzard of ice and wind. Outside, the world is a violent blur of white with no clear boundary between the sky and the earth. But inside your shelter, the fire still burns steady, its warmth wrapping around you like a familiar blanket. In the midst of the storm, you've come to realize something crucial about survival. It isn't always about fighting the storm or wishing for it to stop. Sometimes it's about finding your place within it, recognizing that it too has a rhythm, a way of being. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the crackling of the fire fill your ears, and allow your mind to drift back to the stories you've heard. The way your ancestors would sit around the fire, their faces illuminated by the glow, sharing stories of survival. They spoke of storms like this one, of the fierce wind and the biting cold, and how they learned to not just endure, but to thrive. The storms were always a part of their lives, an inevitable force of nature. They couldn't control it, but they could learn to coexist with it, to understand it in a way that allowed them to survive. Historians still debate the full extent of how Native American communities adapted to the severe winters. Some argue that it was simply the application of practical skills honed over thousands of years. Others believe that there was something more spiritual at play, an understanding of the land that went beyond the practical and into the metaphysical. Whether they knew it or not, however, the traditions, the knowledge passed down, helped them survive the deadliest of winter storms time and time again. They didn't just react to the environment, they worked with it, adapting their way of life to the cycles of the seasons. The firelight dances on the walls of your small shelter, casting long shadows that flicker, like ghosts of those who came before you. The stories they told were not just about survival, they were about respect for the world around them. They understood that nature was not simply something to be conquered, but something to be worked with. They knew how to read the wind, how to understand the subtle changes in the environment that others might miss. It was this understanding of nature's patterns, its moods, that gave them an edge when winter storms struck. The wind outside intensifies, but instead of fear, you feel a sense of calm. The storm isn't something that will pass quickly. It's going to rage for hours, maybe even days, but you know now that you have everything you need to survive it. The shelter, the fire, the knowledge, they are your tools, your armor against the cold. Your ancestors didn't just survive the storms. They understood that these storms were a part of life. They weren't obstacles to avoid, but rather challenges to meet head-on. They had the wisdom to live in harmony with the storm, to make it part of their survival strategy. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind as you think back to the teachings of your elders. They would often say that the cold was something you couldn't avoid, but you could adapt to it. One way they did this was by creating clothing designed to trap heat. The clothes they wore weren't just functional, they were a combination of practicality and art. Animal hides, feathers and furs were used to create garments that insulated the body while still allowing for movement. These materials were carefully selected, each one chosen for its ability to provide warmth and protection against the elements. It wasn't just about having the right gear, it was about understanding the land and its creatures, knowing which animals provided the best protection against the cold. You shift uncomfortably, the cold creeping into your bones despite the warmth of the fire. You can feel your skin tingling, and for a moment you wonder how long you'll be able to endure the storm. The cold is relentless, and it can break even the strongest of bodies. But you remember the knowledge your ancestors passed down. It wasn't just about staying warm, it was about keeping your body active, about using the right movements to generate heat. The key to surviving the storm wasn't sitting still and waiting for it to pass. It was about staying mobile, about keeping your blood flowing, and about knowing when to seek shelter and when to move. You think about the animals that have survived winter storms for centuries. They don't sit idle waiting for the storm to end. They move, they adapt. They know how to find shelter, how to conserve energy, and how to stay safe. Native Americans took this same approach. They didn't simply endure the cold, they worked with it, using the land and the animals to guide them. They knew which animals would be the most reliable for hunting in the winter months, which plants would offer nourishment even when the snow covered everything. They didn't wait for the snow to melt. They used the resources around them to adapt to the situation at hand. As the wind howls outside, you think of the animals, once again remembering that their survival often depended on their ability to outlast the storm. You recall stories of wolves, bears, and other animals that would dig themselves into the snow to keep warm or burrow into the earth for protection. It was a strategy not unlike that of your ancestors, who would dig shelters in the snow or build structures that would protect them from the worst of the storm. They would use the land around them, the natural features that others might overlook, to create safe spaces where they could wait out the worst of the weather. It wasn't just about surviving in a physical sense. The mental aspect of survival was just as important. The cold could take away your body's strength, but it couldn't take your mind unless you let it. The Native Americans knew this, and they used their mental resilience to stay calm during the worst of storms. They didn't panic. They didn't let fear take over. Instead, they focused on what they could control: the fire, the shelter, the resources they had, and the knowledge they carried with them. As the storm rages on, you feel yourself growing tired. The weight of the storm, the constant pressure of the wind, the cold that gnaws at your skin, all of it is enough to wear you down. But you don't give in. You remember the stories of resilience, of how your ancestors would endure through the darkest nights waiting for the storm to pass, knowing that it would just as it always had. They understood that survival wasn't just about enduring the storm. It was about living through it, finding your place in it and making it through to the other side. The wind still howls outside, but it's no longer something you fear. It's simply the storm's song, a rhythm you've learned to move with. You settle back into your shelter, the fire crackling softly beside you. You know that the storm will eventually end just as it always does, and when it does, you'll be ready to face whatever comes next. The storm's howl becomes more distant now, the wind fading into the occasional gust, though the snow still swirls with violent determination. But inside the shelter you feel a sense of calm creeping in. The fire continues to crackle, casting its warm glow over the shelter, and pushing back the cold that threatens to seep in. You settle in, allowing yourself a moment of stillness as the storm rages on outside. The world feels smaller here, contained within the warmth of the firelight and the shelter around you. The elements may be fierce, but within these walls you find a sense of peace. You can't help but think back to the way your ancestors would have experienced nights like these. For them, the storm was more than a mere inconvenience. It was a test, a challenge, that they had learned to face with patience, with skill, and with knowledge. To survive such storms, they had to be resourceful, relying on the land to provide what they needed, whether it was food, shelter, or warmth. But beyond the physical needs, survival was also about mental fortitude. They knew that the cold could break your body, but if you let it, it could break your spirit as well. The knowledge your ancestors passed down wasn't just about how to build a shelter or start a fire. It was about how to stay calm in the face of adversity, how to hold on to hope even when the world outside seemed determined to tear you apart. They understood that survival was as much about your mind as it was about your body. If you lost hope, if you allowed the fear of the storm to overwhelm you, then survival became that much harder. In the stillness of the shelter, you begin to reflect on how much you've learned about yourself in these past few hours. The storm that once seemed so powerful, so insurmountable, now feels like something you've learned to understand. The wind, which once seemed like an enemy, now feels like an old acquaintance. You can hear it, sense it, and predict its next move. The snow which had threatened to bury you now feels more like an ally, a guide that shows you the path if you know how to read it. You've come to realize that, like your ancestors, you too can adapt to the storm. You can learn its rhythms, its patterns, and you can use it to your advantage. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you think of how your ancestors survived. They didn't always have the luxury of taking shelter when a storm hit. Sometimes when the storm was too fierce to find shelter, they would dig into the snow itself, creating a shelter that could provide temporary refuge. It's a practice that sounds almost impossible, but it was one they knew well. By digging into the snow, they created a natural insulation, trapping heat from their bodies and the fire, and using the snow as a barrier against the wind. It wasn't perfect, but it was often enough to survive the worst of the storm. The ingenuity of this technique speaks to the level of understanding they had about the materials around them, how they could use what nature provided to stay alive. The cold outside seems to settle for a moment, but you don't dare become complacent. You know that the storm can return at any moment with even greater fury. The fire flickers in the shelter and you stoke it a little more, adding a few logs to keep the warmth steady. As you sit there, you can't help but think of how important fire was to your ancestors, not just as a source of warmth, but as a symbol of resilience. The fire was a constant in a world full of unpredictability. It was a sign of life in the middle of the storm, a steady reminder that no matter how fierce the world outside became inside this small shelter, there was light, there was warmth, there was hope. You recall the stories you were told about the way Native Americans used fire in their daily lives. It wasn't just for surviving the winter storms. Fire was central to every part of their lives. From cooking food to making tools, fire was indispensable. And in the face of a storm like this, it wasn't just about physical warmth. It was about mental warmth too. The light of the fire kept the darkness at bay, not just in the physical sense, but in the emotional one as well. In the stillness of the storm, the fire became a reminder that even in the most difficult times there was always a way to endure. You sit back, letting the warmth seep into your bones. The fire continues to crackle and you focus on the sound. It's a steady rhythmic noise that contrasts with the violent howling of the wind outside. The contrast is striking. The storm may rage, but in here it feels like time slows down. It's a moment to reflect, to think about what has brought you here and what you've learned. You think about the journey your ancestors took to survive these winters. They didn't have the conveniences we have today. They didn't have the modern tools and technologies that make surviving in the cold easier. What they had was knowledge, an intimate understanding of the land and the resources it provided. They knew how to use every part of the environment to stay alive. They knew how to adapt to the storm, how to work with it rather than fight against it. Historians still argue whether this deep connection to the land was purely a matter of practical necessity, or if it had a more spiritual significance. Some believe it was a combination of both. Survival in the harsh winters was as much about understanding the land on a practical level as it was about viewing the land as sacred, something to be respected and protected. It's possible that the spiritual connection was a way of reinforcing the survival tactics, creating a mindset that allowed people to thrive in such extreme conditions. After all, if you believe that you are in harmony with the land, you're more likely to be patient, to listen to the land's signs, and to act with respect for the world around you. The fire flickers, and you stir it once more, adding a little more kindling to keep it alive. The warmth seems to penetrate deeper, now spreading through your limbs and relaxing your muscles. You think of how your ancestors had to be prepared not just for the storm, but for the long stretch of winter that often followed. Survival wasn't just about getting through a single storm, it was about preparing for the months ahead, knowing how to gather food, how to hunt, how to preserve what you had for the coldest times. This foresight, this ability to plan ahead, was another crucial survival skill passed down from generation to generation. The wind begins to quiet again and you step outside feeling the cool air on your face. The storm is still present, but it's no longer the same terrifying force it once was. Now it feels more like a part of the world you inhabit, something you've come to understand. The snow continues to fall, but the wind is less intense, and you can see the path ahead more clearly. The world outside is still a fierce and dangerous place, but you're no longer afraid of it. You've learned its rhythms, its moods, and you know that with the right knowledge, the right mindset, and the right tools, you can survive it. You return to your shelter and the fire crackles as you settle back into its warmth. The storm outside still rages, but in here, you're safe. The knowledge passed down through the ages has made you stronger, more resilient. You're ready to face whatever the storm has left to throw at you. The storm outside may have subsided, but you can still feel the lingering chill in the air, the faint pressure of the storm's remnants against your shelter. You sit near the fire, basking in its warmth as you listen to the quiet hum of the world beyond. There's a stillness that has descended, almost as if nature itself is catching its breath after the violent outburst. But you know this calm won't last long. The storm was just a momentary interruption in the harsh rhythm of winter. The cold will return as it always does, and with it the familiar challenge of surviving through the darkest months. As you look into the fire, you think of how your ancestors lived through storms like these, not as a rare occurrence, but as an inevitable part of their world. To them, the winter wasn't something to endure for a season. It was a reality they had to prepare for year after year. They weren't just surviving the cold, they were learning how to live within it, how to embrace the winter as a part of the cycle of life. Their lives were shaped by it, their every move in harmony with the world around them. This connection to the seasons, to the land, was integral to their survival. And it's something you feel now, the fire's warmth, the shelter's protection, the knowledge that the storm is just one part of a much larger natural rhythm. It's easy to forget how well Native Americans understood their environment. Historians often point to their exceptional survival skills in harsh conditions as evidence of their deep connection to the land. But it wasn't just an instinctive knowledge. It was something cultivated over generations, honed through trial and error. The wisdom wasn't simply a set of physical skills. It was a cultural inheritance passed down through stories and teachings. These survival strategies weren't just about knowing where to find shelter or how to gather food. They were about understanding the land's rhythms, how it shifted with the seasons, and how to move within it without disrupting the delicate balance. In the quiet of the shelter, you think about the way these skills were passed down. The knowledge wasn't just conveyed through practical lessons, it was taught in the very way people lived. From a young age, children would have learned the subtle signs of the environment, how the trees would bend in the wind, how the snow would fall in certain patterns, how the animals behaved when the storm was coming. This kind of survival knowledge wasn't taught from a book. It was learned by living through the storms, by feeling the cold wind bite at your skin, and by knowing exactly when to seek shelter, when to gather wood, and when to conserve energy. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you sit by the fire, remembering how children were often taught to navigate the natural world in their own way. Native American children didn't just learn how to hunt, fish, or gather. They learned to read the land like a book. They were taught to listen to the wind, to watch the animals, and to understand the subtle cues of the environment. Some children were even taught how to build small shelters from an early age, learning the fundamentals of survival long before they would face their first winter storm. This hands-on education was essential because it taught them how to survive without relying on tools or external help. The skills they developed were not abstract concepts, but practical lived experiences. As the fire's warmth surrounds you, you reflect on how much of this knowledge has been lost to time. The conveniences of modern life have dulled the edge of many survival skills. But even in the modern world, there are lessons to be learned from your ancestors' ability to adapt to their environment. The wisdom they passed down was not just about survival, it was about respect. Respect for the land, respect for the weather, and respect for the cycles of nature. They understood that to live in harmony with the environment meant understanding it, not attempting to control it. And this, you realise, is the key to surviving the storm. It's not about battling the wind or the snow or the cold, it's about finding your place within it. It's about understanding that the storm is part of the world, not an adversary to be conquered. Your ancestors knew this. They didn't fight against the storm, they lived with it. They understood how to work with the elements, how to make use of everything that nature offered. And now you too are beginning to understand that same principle. You recall another aspect of Native American winter survival, the way they preserved food. In a world where fresh food was scarce during the winter months, knowing how to store and prepare food was essential. Native Americans developed intricate methods of drying, smoking, and storing food to ensure they had enough to survive the harsh months ahead. This wasn't just about having food to eat. It was about preparation, about foresight. The ability to predict what the winter would bring and to store resources accordingly was a crucial skill that enabled them to endure. Historians still debate the specifics of these food preservation techniques, with some arguing that different tribes had unique methods based on their specific environment and the animals and plants available to them. It's fascinating to think that each tribe would have developed its own variations on food storage, each one finely tuned to its specific needs. But one thing is clear, the practice of food preservation was a life or death necessity. Without the foresight to store food for the winter, many Native American communities would not have survived the brutal cold. As you sit by the fire, you think of the vast difference between your own modern life and the life your ancestors led. You have access to resources that would have been unimaginable to them. The warmth of your shelter, the convenience of modern technology, and the abundance of food available to you at all times are luxuries they never had. And yet as the storm outside howls, you understand that in many ways they had something you lack, a deep connection to the land, a profound understanding of the rhythms of nature, and the wisdom to survive, not by fighting against the storm but by living with it. The fire flickers again and you add a few more logs, watching the flames dance in the hearth. You know the storm outside is still there, still raging in the darkness, but it doesn't seem quite so threatening now. You've learned its patterns, its rhythms, and in doing so you found a way to coexist with it. You found your place within the storm, and in this moment you realise that you're not just surviving the winter, you're becoming a part of it. The storm will pass as it always does, but the lessons learned in the midst of the storm, the knowledge passed down through generations, will remain. And you, like your ancestors, before you will carry that knowledge forward, ready to face whatever the world brings next. The storm seems to have quieted outside, but you know it's only a temporary lull. The winds have softened, and the howling that had pierced the air earlier has given way to a gentle, almost eerie silence. The snow continues to fall, but the fierce gusts that once drove it through the trees have settled into a soft, steady flurry. There's something strange about this calm after such a chaotic fury. It feels like the world is holding its breath, as if waiting for something to change. But inside your shelter you can relax a little for now. The fire crackles softly, its warm glow pushing back against the cold that still lingers in the air. You think back to how your ancestors would have endured this moment, of how they would have used the quiet to their advantage. The lull after the storm wasn't just a chance to catch their breath. It was an opportunity to assess, to make sure they were ready for whatever came next. They knew that the storm was never truly over until they were sure the worst had passed. So even in moments of quiet, they remained vigilant, always preparing for what might come next. Historians still argue whether Native American communities had formal systems for weather prediction, but there is little doubt that they had an intimate understanding of the natural world. It wasn't based on scientific instruments or complex weather patterns. It was based on observation on years of living with the land and learning its signs. When the wind shifted, when the clouds rolled in, when the animals behaved in certain ways, it was all part of a vast, intricate system of knowledge that told them what to expect. This wasn't just survival, it was a way of life, a philosophy that integrated them into the very fabric of the world they inhabited. You sit back feeling the warmth of the fire on your face and think about how much of that knowledge has been passed down through generations. You've learnt so much about how to survive in the cold, about how to build shelter, how to start a fire and how to find food. But there's something else you've learned, something less tangible yet just as crucial: how to remain calm in the face of chaos, how to trust in the knowledge passed down through your ancestors, and how to make peace with the storm. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind. When the weather grew particularly brutal, Native Americans would often use their understanding of the land to find shelter in unexpected places. For instance, some tribes would take refuge in caves or rock overhangs, where the natural formations offered protection from the wind and snow. These shelters weren't just about being out of the elements. They were carefully chosen for their ability to hold warmth. The rocks themselves would absorb heat during the day and release it slowly through the night, providing a steady source of warmth even in the coldest weather. It wasn't just about finding a place to hide. It was about finding a space that could offer true protection, a space that worked with the natural elements rather than against them. You think about the caves and overhangs that once served as refuges for your ancestors. In many ways, they were the first to understand the idea of green architecture, using natural resources in a way that enhanced survival. They didn't build shelter with materials that could not be sustained. They worked with the land, using its inherent properties to provide the warmth and security they needed to survive. This respect for the land, this understanding that it would provide for them if they used it wisely, was a cornerstone of Native American survival. You also remember the importance of food during these long winter nights. Food was scarce in the winter months and every meal was precious. Native Americans knew which animals were active during the winter, which ones had stores of fat that could be relied on for energy. They didn't waste anything. Every part of the animal was used not just for food, but for clothing, tools and shelter. The skin was tanned and made into clothing or blankets, the bones crafted into tools, and the sinew used for making thread. It was a complete cycle, a way of life that ensured nothing went to waste. The animals provided everything they had, and in return they were respected and revered. Historians often marvel at the efficiency and sustainability of Native American practices. They were experts in using every part of the land, and their survival skills were refined to such a degree that they were able to endure some of the most extreme conditions imaginable. It wasn't just about knowledge, it was about wisdom. Wisdom to know when to hunt, when to gather, and when to rest. Wisdom to know which herbs could heal, which plants could nourish, and which animals were ready to be hunted. This was a wisdom passed down through stories, through lessons learned on long winter nights, and through shared experiences that shaped the survival of entire communities. As the wind picks up again, you hear it howl through the trees, but this time it's a familiar sound. You recognize it now, understand its rhythm. It's a force, yes, but it's not an enemy. It's part of the world you live in, part of the cycle of nature that you've learned to move with rather than fight against. You step outside for a moment, the chill biting at your skin, but you're not afraid. You've learnt how to read the storm, how to work with it. You know that the snow will continue to fall, the wind will continue to blow, but you also know that you have the tools to survive it. You look out at the wilderness around you and realise just how much your ancestors understood. They didn't just survive the cold because they were strong. They survived because they understood how to use the land and its elements to their advantage. They knew that the key to survival wasn't in fighting against the storm, but in living with it, in becoming part of it. And as the storm rages around you, you too begin to feel that connection, that deep understanding that comes from being in tune with the world around you. You return to your shelter and the warmth of the fire welcomes you back. The storm outside seems like a distant memory, but you know it's not over. It will return again just as it always does. But you're ready. The lessons passed down to you through generations have prepared you. You've learned how to survive the storm not by defeating it, but by understanding it, respecting it, and working with it. The storm has begun to settle into a strange rhythm, and the world around you seems to fall into an eerie calm. The howling wind that once felt so threatening now carries a certain familiarity, almost like an old friend. It's still fierce, but it no longer holds the same fear. The snow continues to fall, blanketing the earth, but it seems gentler now, as if the land itself is taking a breath before the next gust arrives. You sit back listening to the quiet moments in between the wind's fury, and let your mind wander back to the lessons of your ancestors. Your people had known these rhythms long before modern science could predict the weather. Native American communities understood that winter was a time of adaptation, not just physical for survival, but mental and spiritual endurance as well. They didn't just get through the winter, they lived within it. The storm was not an adversary, it was a part of the cycle. Your ancestors learned early on that surviving the winter wasn't just about enduring the harshest cold. It was about learning to live in the cold, to move through it with purpose and with knowledge of the land. Historians still argue whether early Native American winter survival techniques were purely practical, or whether they also had spiritual significance. Some scholars suggest that many of these survival methods were linked to the tribe's spiritual beliefs, and that the understanding of the natural world was intertwined with a deeper respect for the land's cycles. Others point to the fact that these practices were born of necessity, with each generation refining techniques that helped them survive in a harsh environment. Regardless of whether there was a spiritual or purely practical element to their survival strategies, one thing is clear: the connection to the land was central to their success. As you reflect on the wisdom of your ancestors, you think about the shelters they built not just to survive, but to thrive within the storm. They didn't build homes to simply withstand the cold, but to adapt to it. Their shelters were designed with an acute understanding of the environment. They knew that the cold could be deadly, but they also understood how to harness the natural elements to make it survivable. The homes they created, whether temporary or permanent, were designed to provide warmth and shelter, not just from the wind and snow, but from the coldest, most brutal elements of nature. When you think about it, these shelters were not just about keeping out the cold, they were part of a larger system of survival. The placement of the shelters, the materials used, and the way they were constructed were all based on years of experience. The walls of the shelters were often made from materials that provided both insulation and durability. The roofs were designed with slopes to allow the snow to slide off easily, preventing the build-up of heavy snow that could collapse the structure. Every element of the shelter was thought through, and it all came together in a way that reflected the deep, intimate knowledge of the land. You begin to realize just how much your ancestors had to understand the land to survive it. Every decision was rooted in this knowledge, from the shelter to the clothing they wore, the tools they crafted, and even the way they stored food. Food preservation, for example, was a major part of surviving the winter. It wasn't just about catching enough animals or gathering enough plants to last until spring. It was about knowing which foods could be preserved for long stretches of time, which ones would provide the necessary sustenance to get through the coldest months. Your ancestors understood how to store meat in ways that would prevent spoilage, how to dry and smoke fish, how to preserve fruits and berries for later use. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you think about food storage. Native Americans would often use large earthenware pots to store food underground during the winter. The earth provided a natural insulation, keeping the temperature inside the pot steady and preventing the food from freezing. This practice was an example of how they used natural resources to their advantage, making the most of what was available to them. They didn't need refrigeration or modern technology to preserve their food, they had the land and their knowledge to make it work. The storm outside begins to pick up again, and you feel the wind bite at the shelter, but you remain calm. You've been through this before. Your ancestors survived these storms, and you've learnt from their wisdom. You know that you don't need to fear the storm, you need to understand it, to read the signs it gives you, and to use that understanding to stay safe. You can hear the sound of the wind outside, the way it whistles through the trees and howls as it moves across the snow. It's a reminder that you're part of a much larger cycle, a cycle that includes not just the storms, but the land itself, the animals, the plants, and the people who've come before you. The storm may rage around you, but you're not alone. You're connected to everything that came before you, to the generations of survivors who learned to live in harmony with the land, who passed down their wisdom, and who taught you how to face the storm with strength and resilience. You think about the animals that have endured the cold for centuries, their instincts guiding them through the harshest of winters. Some animals, like the deer and the wolves, have thick coats of fur to protect them from the elements. Others, like the bears, have adapted to conserve energy during the winter months by hibernating. But no matter their approach, all of them are part of the same natural system that your ancestors learned to navigate. In many ways, Native Americans were just like the animals they observed. They didn't just survive the winter, they adapted to it. They became part of the cycle, not outside of it. As you sit by the fire, you reflect on how far you've come. What once seemed like an insurmountable challenge has become just another part of the rhythm of the world. The storm is no longer something to fear, it's something to understand. The knowledge passed down through generations has prepared you for this moment. You know how to survive the cold, how to read the signs of the weather, and how to adapt to the land. You know how to use the storm rather than fight it to your advantage. The wind howls again outside, but this time it feels different. You no longer feel its biting sting against your skin. Instead, you feel a deep sense of connection, a deep understanding that comes from within. The storm is a part of you now, just as the knowledge passed down through your ancestors is a part of you. You've learned to live within it, to become one with the world around you. The fire crackles in front of you, its warmth a reminder of the resilience that burns within. The storm will pass just as all storms do, and when it does, you'll emerge stronger, wiser, and more connected to the land than ever before. The storm has passed, leaving this world outside muffled under a thick blanket of snow. The wind still rustles through the trees, but it no longer carries the same raw force that it once did. The once violent gusts have softened. Now nothing more than a gentle sigh as the last remnants of the storm clear the skies. The air feels different, fresher, quieter, as though the land itself has been reborn, even if only for a brief moment. The fire crackles softly beside you, its warmth offering a comforting contrast to the stillness outside. You know that this moment of calm is fleeting. Winter is far from over, and the storm, though past, has left its mark. The world will remain cold and harsh for a while longer, and another storm will come. But for now, you allow yourself to pause to reflect on the knowledge you've gained in these moments. You've survived the storm not by brute force or luck, but by understanding it, by reading the signs, and by respecting the land's power. The storm isn't something to fear, it's a part of life, a force that shapes everything around you. And in this quiet moment, you feel a deep connection to that force. Native Americans, throughout their long history, didn't just endure storms, they thrived in the face of them. They'd learned to adapt to the harshest of winters, not just by seeking shelter or starting fires, but by developing a deep relationship with the land itself. This relationship wasn't simply based on survival, it was based on reverence. They understood that the land was not something to be conquered, but something to be worked with, respected, and listened to. It wasn't just about surviving the winter months, it was about living with the cold, with the wind, with the snow. Historians still discuss whether this deep connection to nature was purely a result of survival, or if it also had a spiritual component. Some argue that the reverence for the natural world was a practical necessity, ensuring that each generation passed down the knowledge of how to live in harmony with the land. Others suggest that this connection was more symbolic, a belief system that guided every aspect of life. Regardless of the motivation, one thing remains clear. Native Americans had a profound understanding of how to live with the storms, not just survive them. You think about the many ways they adapted to the cold. The clothing they wore wasn't just functional, it was a result of generations of trial and error. Animal hides were carefully selected and prepared to create garments that could withstand the cold. These garments didn't just protect against the wind, they were designed to trap heat to keep the body warm, even when the temperature dropped to dangerously low levels. The process of creating these clothes wasn't rushed or done carelessly. Every stitch, every piece of material had a purpose, a role to play in keeping the wearer safe. In many ways, the clothing itself was a symbol of the resourcefulness and wisdom passed down through generations. A quirky tidbit about winter survival. Native American women often played a key role in preparing the materials for clothing, using their knowledge of tanning hides to make them more durable and weather-resistant. This process was a delicate balance of art and science, with the hides being treated with natural oils and smoke to create a protective layer that could resist the biting cold. This was not a practice based solely on necessity, it was also a tradition passed down carefully from mother to daughter. The knowledge of how to tan hides to create clothing that could withstand even the most brutal of winters was one of the many ways the women contributed to the survival of their communities. As the warmth of the fire seeps into your body, you think about the shelters that provided refuge during these storms. They weren't just buildings, they were a testament to the ingenuity of the people who built them, whether they were temporary snow shelters or more permanent structures like the teepees and longhouses. Each shelter was designed to minimize exposure to the cold and maximize warmth. The design of these shelters wasn't accidental. They were built with an understanding of how heat rises, how the wind flows, and how the snow behaves. The structures were often built with sloped roofs to help the snow slide off, preventing it from accumulating and adding unnecessary weight. Every detail was thought through to ensure that the people inside would remain safe and warm even in the most extreme conditions. You sit back realizing just how much you've come to understand in such a short time. The storm has taught you something that many have learned over centuries: the importance of adapting to the environment rather than resisting it. You've learned to read the signs, to trust your senses, and to find peace in the chaos. The storm is still out there, but you've come to understand it in a way that makes it no longer seem so threatening. It is just another part of the cycle of life, another challenge that you have learned to meet with strength and resilience. You think of the animals that have survived winter storms for centuries. The deer, the wolves, the bears, all of them have adapted to the cold, to the wind, to the snow. They don't fight it, they use it, they move with it, and they've learned how to thrive in the harshest of conditions. Native Americans understood this. They didn't see the cold as an obstacle to overcome, but as a part of life that needed to be understood. They respected it, they worked with it, and they found ways to coexist with the storm. Their survival wasn't based on strength alone. It was based on knowledge, on understanding the land and its rhythms, and on using that knowledge to stay alive. Historians often note how Native Americans used every part of the land to their advantage. They didn't waste anything. The same was true in winter. Every part of the animal, from the bones to the fur, was used to create shelter, clothing, tools, and food. This was a culture that understood the value of resourcefulness, of using what was available to you, and of making the most of every resource. They had an uncanny ability to survive, using only what nature provided, an ability that was built on a foundation of respect, knowledge, and adaptability. As the fire burns steadily beside you, you feel a sense of calm settle over you. The storm is over for now, but you know it will return. It always does. But with each storm you become more attuned to the land, more connected to the rhythms of nature. You're learning, just as your ancestors did, to live with the storms, not fight against them. The wisdom passed down through generations has prepared you for this moment. You now understand that survival isn't just about fighting the elements, it's about adapting to them, using them to your advantage and finding peace within them. You step outside for a moment, the cool air filling your lungs as you gaze out at the still world beyond. The snow has stopped falling and the wind has quieted to a gentle whisper. The storm is gone, but its lessons remain just as they always have. The world is cold, harsh, and unforgiving, but you have learned how to move through it with the knowledge passed down from those who came before you. You're ready for whatever comes next. The calm after the storm feels almost surreal. The winds that once howled with fury now whisper gently through the trees as if nature is catching its breath. The air is crisp, the world shrouded in a deep, tranquil winds. The snow has blanketed everything, creating a vast, untouched expanse that stretches out before you. But you know better than to become complacent. The storm is not truly gone, it's only resting, preparing to unleash its power again. The harsh reality of winter will return, and the key to survival lies in remaining vigilant, understanding, and prepared. As you sit by the fire once again, you think about how your ancestors would have experienced this quiet moment. For them, the end of the storm wasn't an invitation to relax, but an opportunity to assess their surroundings, to make sure they were ready for the challenges ahead. They understood that each moment of calm was a gift, one to be used wisely. They didn't just survive the winter storms, they lived through them, becoming a part of the rhythm of the season. They knew that the cold would return, and they used every opportunity to prepare for it. You recall the deep knowledge they had of their environment, the way they could read the land like a map, understanding the smallest shifts in the weather, the way the animals moved, the signs the wind left behind. This wasn't something they learned overnight. It was a wisdom passed down through generations, built on years of observation, trial, and adaptation. It was this deep, intimate understanding of the world around them that allowed them to survive even the harshest winters. Historians often wonder how Native Americans developed such an intricate relationship with the land. Some argue that it was simply the result of thousands of years of living in tune with nature. Others suggest that there was a more spiritual element at play, that their survival strategies were rooted in a belief system that saw the land not as something to be conquered, but as something to be respected and worked with. Regardless of the origins of their knowledge, it's clear that they had a profound understanding of the natural world, and it was this understanding that kept them alive during the most brutal of storms. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind as you think of your ancestors' deep connection to the land. Many Native American tribes had what could be called weather wisdom, an innate ability to sense the coming of a storm. They didn't rely on barometers or weather forecasts. Instead, they read the signs that nature provided, the way the birds flew, the behavior of the animals, and even the way the trees swayed in the wind. These subtle clues allowed them to predict weather patterns and prepare accordingly. Some tribes even believed that certain animals, like the owl or the crow, had the abilities to predict storms, and their behavior was a signal that the weather was about to change. This unique ability to read the environment, to sense what was coming, was a skill that saved countless lives. You think about the storm outside, how the wind picked up again, how it seemed to speak to you. It wasn't just a random force of nature. It had a rhythm, a pattern, just like everything else in the world. Your ancestors understood this better than anyone. They didn't just react to the storm, they moved with it, adapting to its rhythms and using its power to their advantage. The storm wasn't their enemy. It was simply a part of the world they lived in, and they knew how to survive it. The shelter you've built is another testament to the knowledge passed down through generations. It's not just a place to hide from the elements. It's a safe space that has been constructed with purpose. The materials you've used, the way you've positioned the shelter, and the fire you've built inside are all part of a carefully planned strategy to maximize warmth and security. Your ancestors too built shelters that reflected their deep understanding of the land. Whether it was a temporary snow shelter or a more permanent structure like a longhouse or a tipi, each shelter was constructed with materials that provided insulation and durability. The roofs were designed to shed snow, preventing dangerous accumulation that could collapse the structure. Every detail was thought through, reflecting the wisdom that had been passed down for generations. As you sit by the fire, you're reminded of the way your ancestors viewed shelter. It wasn't just a structure to protect them from the elements. It was a place that brought people together, a symbol of community. In many Native American cultures, the home was a central gathering place for families and tribes, a place where people shared stories, passed down traditions, and supported one another through the harshest conditions. The shelter wasn't just about survival. It was about creating a space where the community could come together, where everyone contributed to the well-being of the whole. This sense of shared responsibility, this interconnectedness, was as vital to survival as the shelter itself. You look around the shelter feeling the warmth of the fire and the security of your surroundings. It's a reminder of how far you've come and how much you've learned. The storm outside may have been fierce, but inside you're safe. The skills, the wisdom, the knowledge of your ancestors have prepared you for this moment. You've learned how to use the elements to your advantage, how to read the storm, how to stay warm, and how to make sure that you are always ready for what comes next. You think about how life was before the storm, how the days were spent preparing for winter, gathering food, building a shelter, and making sure that everything was ready. The storm didn't just happen suddenly. It was part of a larger cycle, one that your ancestors had lived through many times before. They understood that survival wasn't just about facing one storm, it was about being ready for the next one and the next and the next. It was about living with the seasons, understanding the cycles of nature, and being prepared to adapt to whatever challenges arose. Historians still debate how Native Americans perceived the seasons, but it's clear that they saw them as an integral part of their way of life. They didn't view the cold months as something to dread, but as a necessary part of the world's balance. Winter was a time of reflection, of conserving energy, of preparing for what was to come. It wasn't just a season of hardship. It was a time to connect with the land in a different way, to live in harmony with the cold, to prepare for the spring that would inevitably follow. Your ancestors understood this, and they passed that wisdom down to you. You stand and walk outside for a moment, the cold air crisp against your skin. The world is still the storm, having left a blanket of snow that sparkles under the moonlight. The wind is calm, but the night is far from quiet. There's a stillness, a peace that comes after the chaos. You feel connected to the world around you in a way that you didn't before, as though you've become a part of it just as your ancestors were. The storm has passed, but the lessons it has brought will stay with you. The world may be cold and harsh, but you know now how to survive it, how to live with it, and how to respect it. The fire crackles behind you, a warm reminder of what you've learned. The storm will come again, but you will be ready. The knowledge passed down through generations has prepared you. And just like those who came before you, you will continue to adapt to move with the rhythms of the world and to survive. Not by fighting the storm, but by becoming one with it. The storm has finally passed, and the world outside feels peaceful, almost still. The wind is soft now, its fierce howling reduced to gentle gusts that move the snow in quiet waves. The snow itself blankets everything, covering the earth, in a deep, soft layer that seems to hold the world in place. The air smells crisp and fresh, and the landscape, though harsh and unforgiving, is beautiful in its quietness. The storm has left its mark, but you can see the path forward more clearly now. The storm is no longer an enemy, but a part of the world you've come to understand. As you sit by the fire, the warmth of it wrapping around you, you feel the weight of everything you've learned. The storm, once a terrifying force of nature, has become something you've learned to move with, something you've adapted to. You've learned the rhythms of the wind, the way it picks up and fades, and the subtle shifts in the air that tell you what's coming next. The snow, which once seemed an obstacle, has become a guide, showing you the way, revealing the world beneath its blanket. You've learned to read the land to see the signs it offers, and you've come to respect the wisdom that has been passed down through generations. You think about how your ancestors survived the worst of these storms. They didn't just endure the cold and the snow, they lived with it. They understood that the harsh winters weren't something to fight, but something to work with, to adapt to. They didn't have the tools and technologies we take for granted today, but they had something far more valuable, a deep, intimate knowledge of the land. They knew how to use every part of the environment, from the trees to the animals, to survive the worst of the weather. Their wisdom wasn't something they could write down in books, it was something they carried with them, passed down in stories and the skills of their hands, and in the lessons they learned by living through the storm. Historians often marvel at how Native American communities could survive in such harsh conditions without the modern comforts we enjoy today. Some scholars argue that their survival skills were a result of sheer practicality, a product of thousands of years of trial and error. Others suggest that their deep connection to the land played a more spiritual role, influencing not only how they survived but also how they viewed the natural world. Was their survival purely practical, or was there a deeper, more philosophical understanding at play? Some believe that their relationship with the land, with the storms and with the animals was not just about survival. It was about living in harmony with the world around them. Regardless of the origin of this knowledge, it is clear that your ancestors didn't just survive the storms, they thrive within them. Their shelters, made of materials found in the natural world, were designed not just to keep out the cold, but to make use of the land's natural resources. The skins they tanned were not just for warmth, they were part of a larger system that allowed them to adapt to the ever-changing environment. They understood that each piece of the land had its own purpose, and they knew how to use it to survive. They didn't just wait for the storm to pass. They made the storm part of their lives, learning to move with it, not against it. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you reflect on how your ancestors used every resource available to them. They were known for creating unique tools and instruments from the animals they hunted, tools that were designed for survival in the harshest conditions. For instance, the bones and antlers of animals were often used to create tools like needles, knives and awls. These tools were not just functional, they were finely crafted, honed to perfection over generations. The creativity and resourcefulness that went into creating these tools are a testament to the deep understanding your ancestors had of their environment. They didn't just use the land they moulded, it shaped it and adapted it to their needs. The storm may have passed, but you know that the winter is far from over. The knowledge you've gained, the lessons learned from your ancestors, are not just about surviving one storm, they're about surviving the whole season. You've come to understand that winter, much like the storms themselves, isn't something to fear. It's a part of the natural cycle, a challenge to be met with respect, preparation and adaptability. You know now that each storm, each challenge is just a part of the rhythm of life. And just as your ancestors did, you will face the next one with the wisdom passed down to you. You take a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the fire as it spreads through your body. The wind outside has calmed, but the air is still cold, and you know that another storm could be on its way at any time. You don't fear it, though. You've learned to recognize the signs, to anticipate the changes in the wind and the subtle shifts that tell you what's coming next. You think about the way your ancestors would have done the same. They didn't need modern tools to predict the weather. They had the land, the animals, and the sky to guide them. They listened to the world around them, read the signs it gave, and adapted accordingly. Historians still debate whether Native Americans had a formal system of weather prediction, but what is clear is that they had an intimate knowledge of their environment. They could read the clouds, the wind, the animals, and the trees to tell them what the weather would be like. It wasn't about guessing, it was about knowing. This knowledge was passed down from generation to generation, taught through stories, through experience, and through the practical lessons of living with the land. Your ancestors didn't rely on technology to predict the weather. They relied on their senses, their observations, and their deep understanding of the natural world. You feel a sense of gratitude for this knowledge, for the lessons learned by those who came before you. You realize that you are not just surviving the storm, you're becoming part of it, just as your ancestors did. They didn't just live through the cold, they lived with it. They adapted to it and they found strength in it. And now you too are learning to do the same. As the storm outside begins to settle into a soft flurry, you stand up and walk outside, taking in the crisp night air. The world is still the snow gleaming in the moonlight. The fire inside may be small, but its warmth still lingers in your bones. The storm may have passed, but the lessons remain. You are ready for whatever comes next. The storm has truly passed now, leaving behind a world that feels remarkably still. The winds have softened their howling, replaced by the occasional gust that moves the snow in graceful swirls. The cold is persistent, but it no longer feels as threatening as it once did. The blanket of snow now sparkles beneath the moonlight, a pristine sheet covering the earth, and the air smells sharp and fresh. It's almost as though the storm's fury has cleansed the world, and for the first time in what feels like ages, there's peace. You sit by the fire once again, watching the flames dance, the warmth spreading through your body. But as you stare into the flickering light, you can't help but reflect on how much you've learned. This isn't just about surviving one storm. It's about surviving every storm that may come, and there will be more. The wind will pick up again. The snow will return, and each time you will have to adapt just as your ancestors did before you. They didn't face these storms with fear. They faced them with understanding. They learned how to read the signs in the land, how to move with the rhythms of the world, and how to make use of everything the earth had to offer. Native Americans over the course of generations mastered this art of survival. They didn't just endure the harsh winters, they thrived in them. They adapted not only their physical environments, but their entire way of life. Every decision was made with the changing seasons in mind. They knew when to prepare for winter, and how to do so in a way that was not just practical, but also sustainable. It wasn't enough to survive the storm. You had to learn how to live through it to make it a part of your life, just as you've done now. Scholars still debate the spiritual significance of the relationship Native Americans had with the land. Some believe their deep connection to the earth went beyond practical necessity and reflected a worldview that saw humans as stewards of the land rather than conquerors. Others argue that this connection was purely based on survival, a way of ensuring that each generation passed down the skills necessary to thrive in the wilderness. But regardless of the exact nature of this relationship, it's clear that their understanding of nature was far more than just a survival tactic. It was a philosophy, a way of life that recognized the interconnectedness of all things. They knew that living in harmony with nature was essential for survival. They didn't separate themselves from the world around them, they were part of it. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you think about how survival knowledge was passed down. It wasn't just taught in the form of practical lessons, it was embedded in the stories that were shared around the fire, in the songs that were sung, and in the rituals that were performed. These traditions weren't just ways to pass the time, they were vital methods of ensuring that the wisdom of past generations didn't get lost. In many ways, the survival skills that were passed down weren't just about the physical tools or techniques, they were about maintaining a connection to the earth itself. The stories and songs kept that connection alive, making sure that every lesson learned from nature, every sign, every season was remembered and shared with those who came after. You think about how they managed to predict weather changes, how they read the land, the animals and the sky to know when a storm was approaching. It wasn't the result of studying meteorological charts or watching the news. It was an intimate understanding of the land. They noticed how the birds behaved before a storm, how the trees swayed in the wind, how the clouds formed on the horizon. This wasn't guesswork. This was knowledge that had been honed over generations, and it kept them alive. They didn't just survive the storms, they knew they were coming, and they knew what to do when they arrived. This is something you've begun to understand more fully now. Historians still argue about the specifics of Native American weather forecasting, but it's clear that they had an extraordinary ability to read the environment. Some tribes even used certain animals as indicators for changes in the weather. The owl, for example, was often seen as a harbinger of stormy weather. Its unusual behaviour, its hoots echoing through the trees, would signal that a storm was on the horizon. This connection between the animal kingdom and the weather was not just practical knowledge, it was part of the spiritual worldview that helped guide every aspect of Native American life. You sit back in your shelter feeling the fire's warmth and the knowledge of your ancestors settling over you like a protective cloak. You know that this storm will not be the last. Winter will return, and with it more challenges, but you're no longer afraid of them. You've learned how to read the signs, how to prepare, and how to move through the cold. You are part of this land just as your ancestors were. You understand its rhythms, its shifts, and its cycles. The storm is not a threat, it's a force of nature just as the wind and the snow are. And with the right knowledge, the right respect for the land, and the right preparation, it is a force that can be lived with. The storm outside begins to pick up again, but you feel no fear. You've learned its ways. You've come to understand that the wind, the snow, the cold, they are not enemies. They are challenges to be faced, but also to be respected. You step outside once more, the cold air sharp against your skin. The world is still the snow, a shimmering blanket beneath the moonlight. The wind howls, but it no longer feels threatening. You recognize its pattern, its rhythm. The land is your guide, your teacher. The storm is just another part of the world you inhabit, another lesson to be learned, another challenge to be met. You think back to the stories of your ancestors. They didn't just survive the winter, they lived with it. Understanding its place in the cycle of life. They knew the storm would return just as they knew the spring would come after it. They were prepared for both living each season in harmony with the land. You've learnt that same lesson. The storm will pass, but it is never truly gone. It is part of the rhythm of life, and by understanding it, by moving with it, you too can thrive in its wake. The fire crackles beside you, the warmth still radiating through the shelter. You know that the storm will return, but you will be ready. The knowledge passed down through the generations has prepared you, and just like those who came before you, you will continue to adapt to learn, and to live with the land, not against it. The wind picks up again, but it no longer carries the same urgency. The storm that once dominated the land has turned into a quieter, more persistent force. It feels as though it is simply reminding you that it is still here, that it still holds sway over the world. The snow continues to fall, but its rhythm has slowed no longer. A raging torrent, but a gentle, persistent shower. The quiet after the storm is different now. The calm that follows is filled with the knowledge that the land, even in its most brutal moments, is still alive, still moving, still changing. You sit by the fire, watching its flickering light as it dances in the darkness. The warmth of the flames is a stark contrast to the chill that seeps through the shelter, but you don't mind. You've learned to embrace the cold, to accept it as part of life. The storm is not something to fight against, but something to move with. The wind, the snow, the cold, they are not adversaries. They are simply forces of nature, and it is through understanding them that survival becomes possible. Native American communities were masters at living with the land, not against it. Their survival skills were built on a deep understanding of the environment, and this connection went beyond the practical. It was an intimate relationship, one that was built on respect and reverence. They didn't simply survive the storms, they understood them, they used them to their advantage. The storm wasn't something to be feared, it was something to work with, something to adapt to. You reflect on the wisdom passed down through generations. Your ancestors didn't rely on modern technology or advanced weather forecasts. They didn't need to. They had something far more powerful, an acute awareness of the natural world around them. They knew how to listen to the wind, to read the signs in the sky, to understand the behaviour of the animals. They didn't just observe nature, they lived with it. They recognised its rhythms and learned to move in harmony with them. Scholars still debate whether Native Americans viewed the natural world purely in practical terms, or whether there was a more profound spiritual connection to the land. Some believe that their understanding of nature was shaped by a worldview that saw humans as part of the ecosystem living in balance with the world around them. Others argue that it was purely survival-based knowledge passed down through generations to ensure the survival of the people. Regardless of the exact origins, it is clear that this deep connection to the land played a vital role in their ability to survive the harshest winters. They didn't just live off the land, they were a part of it. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind as you think back to how Native Americans would use the elements to their advantage. One of the most remarkable survival skills they had was their ability to create temporary shelters out of snow itself. These snow shelters, known as quingees, were built by hollowing out a large mound of snow. The snowpack tightly acted as insulation, keeping the warmth inside while protecting from the cold outside. This shelter wasn't just a temporary refuge, it was a masterful use of the environment. It was an example of how Native Americans could live with the land, using its resources to stay safe, even in the most extreme conditions. The snow outside continues to fall gently, its light coating covering the world in silence. The fire crackles in your shelter, the warmth a reminder of the lessons you've learned. You think about the many ways your ancestors survived the cold winters. The shelters they built weren't just places to stay warm. They were symbols of resilience. The way they used fire wasn't just to keep warm, it was a tool for survival. But more than that, it was a symbol of life itself. The fire represented the strength and knowledge that had been passed down through generations, the ability to endure, to adapt, and to thrive. As the wind howls outside, you realize that you're not alone in this experience. The wisdom of your ancestors, their knowledge of the land, has been passed down to you. You are connected to them just as you are connected to the land around you. Their survival was not about fighting the storm, it was about learning to live within it, to use it as a guide. They knew that nature in all its power was not an enemy. It was a partner, and survival came not from fighting against it, but from understanding it, from moving with it. The fire grows a little warmer, and you feel the tension leave your body. You have learned so much in such a short time, but there's still more to learn. The storm will return, and so will the cold. Winter is far from over, but you're ready. You've learned how to read the land, how to anticipate the storm, and how to adapt to the changing world around you. You're no longer afraid of the storm, you are part of it. The storm outside continues, but now it feels more like a companion than a foe. You recognize its patterns, understand its rhythms, and use them to your advantage. The wind is no longer something to fear, it is a part of the landscape, part of the cycle of life. The snow, though cold and unyielding, now feels like a guide showing you the way, revealing its secrets if you know how to read them. Historians still argue over how much of the survival knowledge was based on necessity, and how much of it was part of a larger worldview. But the fact remains that Native Americans lived in harmony with the land in ways that most of us can barely imagine today. They understood the land as a living, breathing entity, and they saw themselves as part of it. They didn't fight against nature, they worked with it, adapting to its rhythms, its cycles, and its storms. And in doing so, they thrived. You think about the lessons you've learned. You've discovered that survival isn't just about fighting the elements. It's about understanding them, adapting to them, and learning how to live with them. The storm will always come, but with the right knowledge, the right respect, and the right preparation, it becomes just another part of the cycle. You've come to understand that you're not separate from the land or the storm. You're part of it, and in that understanding you find strength. As the storm continues to rage outside, you take a deep breath and let the warmth of the fire fill you. The storm will pass, and when it does, you will be ready for whatever comes next. You have learnt the lessons your ancestors passed down to you, and now you carry those lessons forward. You are no longer just surviving the storm, you are living with it. The storm continues to linger in the air, its presence subtle yet constant. The wind shifts occasionally, but it no longer carries the same weight it did before. The snow, though still falling, has softened in its intensity. It's as though the storm is settling into its final moments, winding down after its furious outburst. In the shelter you feel a deep sense of peace. The fire still burns bright, crackling and popping, casting a warm glow that contrasts sharply with the cold outside. The warmth is soothing, but more than that, it is a reminder of the resilience that runs through your veins. You're not merely surviving the storm, you're living with it. You've learned so much from the storm, from the knowledge that has been passed down through generations. This isn't just about physical survival, it's about mental endurance, about learning to read the land, the wind, and the signs that nature provides. You've learned how to listen to the wind, how to read the snow, how to anticipate the changes in the air. Your ancestors didn't just survive the winter storms, they mastered them. They didn't fear the cold or the snow, they respected it, and in that respect they thrived. Native Americans had an unmatched ability to adapt to the harshest environments. They didn't have the conveniences we have today, no insulation, no modern tools, no heated homes, but they had something far more valuable, a deep understanding of the land and the seasons. They understood that nature wasn't their enemy. It was a force to be respected and worked with. The key to their survival lay in their ability to move with nature to use its cycles to their advantage. Historians still argue whether the survival techniques of Native Americans were simply born from necessity, or whether there was a spiritual connection to the land that made their survival so effective. Some believe that their connection to the land was a matter of practical knowledge, and survival honed over thousands of years of living in harmony with the earth. Others suggest that their deep respect for nature went beyond practicality. It was a worldview that saw them as part of the earth, not separate from it. Regardless of the origin of their wisdom, it is clear that the connection they had to the land was vital to their survival. They didn't just adapt to their environment, they thrived within it. As you sit by the fire, you think about how they managed to live through the coldest, most brutal winters. They didn't just endure, they made use of everything the land had to offer. The shelters they built, the tools they crafted, the clothing they wore, all of it was designed to maximize warmth, minimize exposure to the cold, and use the resources available to them. They didn't have the luxury of modern conveniences. They had to be resourceful, and they were masters at it. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you think about the ingenuity of your ancestors. They didn't just rely on animal hides for clothing and shelter. They used the bones and sinew to create tools, and thread the fat for food and for lubrication. Even the smallest part of an animal was used. The meat was preserved for the long winter months, the hides tanned and used for warmth, and the bones carved into knives, needles, and other tools. Nothing went to waste. Every part of the animal had a purpose. This wasn't just about survival, it was a lesson in respect. They understood that the animals gave their lives to sustain them, and in return, they used every part of the animal to its fullest potential. This mindset, this approach to life wasn't just about survival, it was about honouring the earth, honouring the animals, and honouring the cycle of life. As the fire crackles in front of you, you remember the stories that were passed down through the generations. These stories weren't just about survival techniques. They were about respect for the land, for the animals, and for the seasons. The stories told around the fire weren't just entertainment, they were essential lessons. The teachings embedded in these stories help future generations survive, not just physically but spiritually. The wisdom of the elders wasn't simply about learning how to hunt or gather food, it was about learning how to live in harmony with the world around them. You sit back feeling the warmth of the fire on your face and reflect on the lessons you've learned. The storm may have passed, but you know that another will come, and when it does, you will be ready. The knowledge you've gained from your ancestors has prepared you not just to survive the storm, but to thrive within it. You've learned that the storm is not an enemy to fight. It is a part of the cycle of life, and it is through understanding it that you can survive and even flourish. You step outside for a moment, the cold air biting at your skin as you take in the view. The snow is still falling, but it is a gentle, quiet fall, the kind that brings peace rather than chaos. The world outside feels still, as if everything is at rest, waiting for the storm to pass completely. The wind has softened, and the air feels clear, crisp, and refreshing. You stand there for a moment, letting the cold fill your lungs, feeling the connection to the land beneath your feet. The storm may have been fierce, but it was also a part of the Earth's natural rhythm. The world will continue to shift, to change, to endure, and so will you. The knowledge your ancestors passed down has given you the tools to survive. The wisdom they shared has taught you how to read the world, how to live in harmony with the earth, and how to move with the seasons. You are not just surviving the winter, you're becoming part of it, understanding its rhythms, moving with its flow. As night deepens, you return to your shelter, the warmth of the fire welcoming you back. The storm outside is nothing more than a memory now, a lesson learned. You're ready for whatever comes next. The lessons you've learned from the wind, the snow, and the fire will guide you just as they guided your ancestors. The storm will come again, and when it does, you'll be ready to face it. You'll move with it, live with it, and thrive within it just as those who came before you did. The air has changed a crispness that cuts through even the warmth of your shelter. The fire crackles steadily beside you, and though it fights against the chill, it feels like the storm's presence is still with you. The wind has slowed, but it still carries the hint of danger, whispering its threats from beyond the walls of your refuge. Snow falls with a gentle persistence, painting the world outside in soft layers of white. It's in moments like this, with the storm having passed, but its memory still lingering, that you begin to understand what it means to live with the cold. The weather isn't something to escape, it's something to adapt, something to shape your life around. You think about how your ancestors would have faced this moment, how they too would have seen the world in front of them, not as something to fight, but something to live with. They had an understanding of the elements that went beyond mere survival. They understood that the storm wasn't the enemy, it was a part of life, and to survive, they needed to learn to live within the rhythms of the seasons. They didn't just get through the winters, they learned how to thrive in them, how to use the snow, the cold, and the wind to their advantage. Historians still argue whether Native Americans' profound connection to nature was simply a product of necessity, or something that reached deeper into their worldview. Some believe that their survival tactics were shaped purely by the need to endure the environment honed over thousands of years. Others propose that this connection was more philosophical, a belief that humans were an integral part of the earth, that their survival was tied to living in harmony with the land. This deeper understanding of their environment meant that they didn't just rely on physical tools, they had an intuitive sense of how the natural world worked, and this knowledge made them resilient. It was not about conquering the world around them, but about becoming one with it. As you sit by the fire, you reflect on how your ancestors understood the cycles of nature. They didn't just endure the storms, they adapted to them. Each storm, each change in the wind, was not just an obstacle. It was part of a larger story, one they had learned to read. They knew when the snow would be thick and heavy, when the wind would come from the north, and when it would be safe to leave their shelter. It was a skill passed down through generations, a finely honed instinct. And it wasn't something that could be learned overnight. It was the result of years of watching, listening, and understanding the small changes that others might miss. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind. Native American tribes had a way of predicting weather that didn't rely on technology or instruments. Some tribes believed that certain animals like the owl or the crow could sense changes in the weather long before it would be obvious to humans. The behavior of these animals would signal to the tribe that a storm was coming. This wasn't superstition. It was a finely tuned observation of the world and knowledge passed down through generations. It wasn't based on scientific measurements, but on experience and an intuitive understanding of how nature worked. The animals were not only a part of the ecosystem, they were a part of the weather itself, a signal that nature was shifting and the storm was approaching. The more you think about it, the more you understand that survival wasn't just about learning physical skills, it was about tuning into the land, listening to the world around you and learning to move with it. Your ancestors understood that to survive a storm, they needed to understand everything about it. The direction of the wind, the way the animals behaved, the type of snow that was falling, each piece of information was a puzzle that they could solve. And they passed this knowledge on to you not through books or formal lessons, but through stories, through experience, and through the wisdom of knowing how to read the world. You begin to realize that the storm is not over, not really. The lessons it has left behind are still unfolding. The storm was a teacher, and though it has passed, its lessons are woven into the fabric of this land. You've learned how to read its signs, how to predict its movements, and how to adapt to its rhythms. The storm is not a force to be feared, but one to be understood. And now you are ready for the next one. You step outside again, the cold air biting at your face. The world is still the snow blanketing everything in a soft, peaceful silence. The wind stirs occasionally, but it's no longer the furious howling it once was. It feels like nature itself is resting, waiting for the next phase of the cycle to begin. And you are a part of that cycle now, just as your ancestors were. The storm is not something separate from you. It's something that you've learned to live with, something that you've become a part of. Historians still discuss the ways Native Americans connected to the land, whether it was a spiritual or purely practical connection. One thing that stands out, though, is the way this connection shaped their survival strategies. It wasn't just about using the land, it was about being a part of it, understanding it and moving with it. The wisdom passed down through the generations wasn't just about building shelter or starting fires. It was about understanding the cycles of nature and learning to live in harmony with them. You feel that connection now, standing outside in the cold, watching the snow fall softly around you. The storm may have passed, but the lessons remain. The knowledge that has been passed down to you, the wisdom of your ancestors, is now a part of you. You are no longer simply surviving the storm. You are living with it, understanding it, and moving with it. And when the next storm arrives, you will be ready, not just to survive, but to thrive. You return to your shelter, the warmth of the fire welcoming you back. The storm outside is no longer a threat. It is simply another part of the world, another chapter in the story that has been unfolding for generations. And you, like your ancestors, are part of that story. You have learned how to adapt, how to understand, and how to live with the land. The storm will return, but you will face it with the knowledge and wisdom that have been passed down to you. The fire continues to crackle, the warmth from its flames filling the space around you. The storm outside is just another challenge, another lesson, and you're ready for it. You're no longer just surviving the storm, you're living through it, thriving within it. And as the night deepens, you know that no matter what comes next, you will face it with the knowledge of those who came before you, prepared for whatever the world throws your way. The storm has passed for now, but the cold still bites at the edges of your consciousness. The wind is gentle, the snowfall steady but light. Outside, the world is quiet and blanketed in a thick layer of snow, as though the earth is taking a moment to rest, to reset. The fire inside your shelter continues to crackle softly, its warmth wrapping around you like a gentle embrace. The warmth is soothing, but it isn't just the fire that keeps you calm. It's the knowledge, the understanding you've gained over the course of this storm. You've adapted. You've learned to move with the land, with the wind, and with the snow. As you sit beside the fire, you reflect on how much you've come to understand. The storm, once a source of fear and uncertainty, now feels like something you've conquered, something you've learned to live with. You think about the wisdom of your ancestors, how they understood the land and its rhythms in a way that allowed them not just to survive, but to thrive in the harshest of conditions. They didn't fear the storm. They didn't see it as something to fight. They saw it as part of life, part of the natural cycle, and they adapted accordingly. Native Americans had a deep understanding of nature and its cycles. They didn't just learn how to survive the winter storms, they learned how to use them to their advantage. They knew when to move, when to hunker down, and when to trust the weather to tell them what was coming next. Their survival wasn't just about knowing where to find shelter or how to make fire. It was about understanding the natural world and using it as a guide, a teacher. Historians often discuss how Native Americans were able to live in harmony with the land, but few realized just how deep that connection was. It wasn't just about practical survival skills. It was about a worldview that saw humans as part of the earth, not separate from it. They didn't dominate the land, they worked with it. They adapted to its cycles, learning how to anticipate its moods, how to read the signs it left behind. And in doing so, they lived in balance with nature, not in opposition to it. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you think about the way your ancestors survived. They didn't have the modern tools or technologies that we rely on today, but they were experts in using the resources at their disposal. They knew which animals would be most reliable for hunting during the winter, which plants could provide nourishment, and how to use every part of the animals they hunted. They didn't waste anything. Every part of the animal had a purpose, whether it was used for food, clothing, tools, or shelter. This resourcefulness wasn't just about making do, it was about respect for the earth, respect for the life that was given, and a deep understanding that every part of nature had value. The storm outside is still present in the way the wind shifts and moves the snow, but it no longer holds the same fear it once did. You've learnt to read it, to understand it, and now it feels like an old friend. It's no longer a force to battle against, but something to move with. The snow may still be falling, but you know that you've prepared for this. You've built your shelter, you've gathered your firewood, and you've learned to use the land's natural resources to keep you warm, fed, and safe. You realise that survival in these conditions isn't just about the physical tools you have. It's about mental strength, about resilience. Your ancestors didn't survive the winter because they were tougher than others. They survived because they had the knowledge, the adaptability, and the understanding of the land that allowed them to thrive even in the harshest conditions. They didn't just survive the storm, they learned how to coexist with it. The quiet of the shelter is a welcome contrast to the storm outside. The fire's warmth continues to spread, and as you sit there, you begin to feel a sense of peace, a feeling of connection to the land and to those who have come before you. You are part of this land, part of this cycle. The storm may have passed for now, but the lessons it has taught you are lasting. You have learned that survival is not just about enduring the storm. It's about living with it, learning from it, and moving with its rhythm. As the fire continues to burn, you think about the future. The storm will come again, as it always does, but you are no longer afraid. You have the knowledge and the skills to face it. You've learned to read the signs of the land, to understand the language of the wind and the snow. You're not separate from this world. You're a part of it, and in that connection you find strength. You step outside again, feeling the cold air fill your lungs. The world is still, the snow falling softly, and the wind is nothing more than a whisper. You look around at the landscape, feeling the vastness of it, the stillness of it. And yet there's a deep connection here. The land is alive, and you are part of it. The storm, once a force of fear, has become a teacher, a guide. You no longer see it as something to fight against. You've learned to move with it. Historians still debate how much of the survival knowledge of Native Americans was learned through experience and how much was passed down through spiritual beliefs. Some argue that their intimate connection to nature was purely based on practicality, an accumulation of knowledge built over thousands of years. Others believe that their understanding of the land was influenced by a deeper spiritual connection, a belief that humans were an integral part of the Earth's cycles. Regardless of the origin, one thing is clear. The survival of Native Americans during the winter storms wasn't just about physical endurance. It was about an understanding of the land, a respect for its rhythms, and a deep knowledge of how to live in harmony with the natural world. You stand outside for a moment longer, letting the stillness wash over you. The storm may have passed, but its lessons remain. You're not just surviving, you're thriving, moving with the land, adapting to its rhythms. You have learned to live in harmony with the elements, to use their power to your advantage. The storm is not something to fear. It's a part of life, a part of the cycle that you are now deeply connected to best. As you return to the shelter, the warmth of the fire welcomes you back. The storm outside is nothing more than a distant memory, but the lessons it has taught you are clear. You've learned to survive, to adapt, and to move with the rhythm of nature. And when the next storm arrives, you will be ready. The storm has receded now, leaving the world under a thick, pristine layer of snow. The wind has slowed to a whisper, and the snow falls more gently, almost serenely, as though the earth is wrapped in a peaceful slumber. The sky is a soft grey, giving everything a muted, ethereal quality. The air is crisp, each breath sharp and clean. Inside the shelter, the fire still crackles its warmth, a constant companion against the cold that remains outside. You sit there listening to the fire's song and feeling the rhythm of the world outside. In these moments, it becomes clear to you that survival in this environment isn't about simply enduring the harshness of winter. It's about learning to become one with it. The storm, which at first seemed like an overwhelming force, now feels like part of the landscape, just as the trees, the rocks, and the animals are. The cold is no longer an enemy, but a presence to be understood, respected, and worked with. Your ancestors understood this far better than any modern survivalist or weather expert. They knew that the key to surviving in such an unforgiving environment wasn't about brute strength or sheer willpower. It was about adapting to the land's rhythms, learning how to read the signs, and living in harmony with the elements. As the wind outside shifts again, you think about the intimate connection Native Americans had with the land. It was an understanding not just of survival, but of belonging. They didn't see themselves as separate from the world around them. They were part of it. Every animal, tree and stone had its place, and every part of the land provided something essential for their survival. The knowledge they passed down wasn't merely practical. It was about living with the land, respecting its cycles, and learning how to move with the seasons. Historians have often debated how Native Americans managed to thrive in such harsh conditions, especially without the technological tools we rely on today. Some argue that their survival skills were a product of pure necessity, a result of living in an environment that forced them to adapt. Others believe that the connection to the land went beyond mere practicality, that it was rooted in a spiritual understanding of the earth as a living, breathing entity. Whether this understanding was born from the need for survival or spiritual insight, one thing is clear. The wisdom passed down through generations was essential to their ability to live through the harshest winters. As you sit by the fire, you remember how your ancestors would have prepared for a storm like the one you just experienced. Their shelters weren't simply buildings, they were designed with an understanding of the land's rhythms. Every part of the shelter had a purpose, from the materials used to the way it was constructed. The roofs were built at angles that would allow snow to slide off, preventing dangerous accumulation. The walls were made from materials that would trap heat and provide insulation, allowing the warmth of a fire to fill the space and keep the cold at bay. It wasn't just about making do, it was about creating a safe, functional environment that would allow them to thrive in the harshest conditions. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind as you reflect on these structures. Native American shelters often used natural resources in ways that were both ingenious and sustainable. For example, some tribes would use animal hides to cover the walls of their shelters, creating a thick insulating barrier against the cold. The hides would trap warmth, and when the weather turned warmer, they could be removed and cleaned, allowing the shelter to adapt to the changing seasons. These shelters were flexible, functional, and deeply attuned to the natural world. They weren't just places to survive, they were expressions of the relationship between people and the land. As the fire continues to burn, you realize that it's not just about surviving the storm, it's about learning to live in harmony with it, to find peace within it, and to respect the power it holds. Your ancestors didn't just battle the cold, they worked with it. They understood that winter, though harsh, was a part of the cycle, and they adapted accordingly. The wisdom they passed down taught them how to not just endure, but to live with the land, to thrive within it. Historians have long pondered whether the connection between Native Americans and their environment was purely practical, or if it held deeper spiritual significance. Some believe that their knowledge was solely born from necessity, from a deep understanding of how to survive in a challenging environment. Others suggest that their respect for nature was also rooted in spiritual beliefs, that the land itself held meaning, and that survival was a way of maintaining harmony with it. Regardless of the origins of this knowledge, one thing is clear: the relationship between Native Americans and the land was far more than just survival. It was a philosophy, a way of life that intertwined respect, knowledge, and an intimate connection to nature. You reflect on the skills that your ancestors passed down to you, skills that have been refined over countless generations. They didn't just learn how to survive, they learned how to live. They didn't just fight against the storm, they learned to move with it. They respected it, understood it, and used its rhythms to guide them. You've learnt those same lessons. You've learnt to read the wind, to understand the snow, to anticipate the cold, and to adapt. The storm may have passed, but you're ready for the next one. You've become part of the cycle, part of the land's rhythm. You step outside, once again the crisp air greeting you with a sharpness that fills your lungs. The world outside is calm, the wind only a faint whisper. The snow continues to fall, but it's a gentle, almost soothing presence now. You take a deep breath, feeling the peace that comes from understanding, from being in tune with the world around you. The storm may have passed, but its lessons remain. You know that the next one will come just as surely as the seasons change, but you are no longer afraid. You are ready. Historians still debate how Native Americans perceived the land, whether they saw themselves as stewards of the earth or simply as a part of it. Some argue that their deep connection to the land was driven by necessity, while others suggest that it was a more spiritual relationship. But whatever the origin of their wisdom, it is clear that they didn't just survive the storm, they thrived within it. Their survival was not just about knowledge, but about respect for the land, its rhythms and its cycles. It was a philosophy that allowed them to live in harmony with the world, and it's a lesson you now carry with you. The storm is over for now, but its lessons will stay with you. You're not just surviving the winter, you're learning to live with it. You have come to understand the land, its rhythms and its power. You've learned to move with the storm, not against it, and in doing so you have become part of it. The storm has finally moved on, but the land still feels alive with its passing. The snow continues to fall gently, almost like a blanket being laid down over the world. The wind no longer roars through the trees. Instead, it whispers softly as though calming down after its outburst. The sky is muted clouds lingering overhead, but the earth beneath is still. The chill in the air remains, but it is no longer as biting as it was just hours ago. The world is quiet, but there's a deep resonating energy in the stillness. You stand in the doorway of your shelter for a moment, taking in the view, feeling the cold air fill your lungs. It's a harsh beauty that you've come to appreciate the landscape, though. Severe feels both challenging and full of potential. You're part of this world now, just as your ancestors were, and it's a feeling that brings with it a sense of connection. You think back to the way they lived with the storm, not as something to be feared, but as part of the natural rhythm of life. Native Americans didn't just learn to survive the elements. They understood them, they adapted to them, and in doing so they found ways to thrive. The storm wasn't something to fight, it was something to anticipate, to prepare for, and to live within. It was a challenge, yes, but also an opportunity. They knew the land, the wind and the snow in a way that allowed them to use them to their advantage. They didn't conquer nature. They worked with it, respecting its power and understanding its patterns. Many historians have reflected on the adaptability and resourcefulness of Native Americans, often marvelling at how they lived in harmony with the land. Some argue that this deep knowledge was the result of necessity, a survival instinct honed over generations of living in the harshest conditions. Others suggest that their connection to nature went beyond mere survival. It was a way of life, one that saw them as part of the ecosystem, not separate from it. Their ability to read the land, predict the weather, and adapt their actions accordingly wasn't just practical knowledge. It was a philosophy, a worldview that allowed them to exist in balance with the earth. Their knowledge wasn't about controlling nature, it was about understanding it, moving with it and learning from it. A fascinating tidbit comes to mind as you think about how your ancestors prepared for the winters. They didn't just gather food and build shelter. They also knew how to preserve the land's offerings, ensuring they had what they needed when the snow covered the earth and the animals were harder to find. Preservation was a practice steeped in ingenuity. Drying meat, smoking fish and preserving berries were just a few methods they used to ensure they could survive the winter months. But what was truly remarkable was their knowledge of which foods would provide them with the necessary nutrients to endure the coldest nights. They didn't just store food, they stored knowledge about what they needed to stay strong in the face of the harshest conditions. As you sit by the fire, you think about how this knowledge was passed down generation after generation. It wasn't just through practical lessons, it was through stories. The elders would sit by the fire telling tales of survival, recounting how they had lived through the harshest winters, how they had learned from the land and how the earth had taught them the ways of survival. These weren't just stories, they were lessons coded into the fabric of each word, each sentence. The stories of the ancestors weren't just entertainment, they were blueprints for survival, for understanding the land and for living with the storm. The warmth of the fire is a comforting presence, but it also represents something more: resilient knowledge and the ability to thrive in adversity. The flame flickers, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and you realize how much you've learned in such a short time. Survival in the storm isn't about fighting the elements, it's about becoming one with them. You've learned to read the weather, to anticipate the wind, to understand the snow. You've learned how to stay warm, how to gather food, and how to create a shelter that will protect you. But more than that, you've learned that survival is not a solitary effort. It is about community, about learning from the past, and about honouring the knowledge that has been passed down to you. As you sit in the shelter, you realise just how much of your survival depends on your connection to the land, to the people who came before you. The fire crackles the warmth enveloping you, and you think of how the ancestors sat in fires just like this one, sharing their stories, passing down their knowledge. They didn't just survive the storm, they lived with it, using the lessons of the past to guide them through the harsh winters. And now, those same lessons are part of you. There's something powerful about the knowledge that has been passed down through generations. It's not just practical survival skills. It's a way of seeing the world, a way of understanding the land and its rhythms. It's about recognizing the storm not as an enemy, but as part of the world's cycle. Something that comes and goes, something that teaches you something that you can adapt to. The storm is not an insurmountable challenge. It's a part of life. Your ancestors understood this, and now you do too. Historians still debate whether Native Americans had a formal system of education or whether they simply relied on experience and observation. But regardless of how it was structured, one thing is certain: the knowledge passed down was invaluable. The teachings weren't just about survival, they were about respect, about understanding, about living in harmony with the earth. This deep connection to the land, this knowledge of how to move with the storm, has allowed generations to endure, and it's allowed you to do the same. You stand outside once more, the cold air filling your lungs, and look out over the snow-covered landscape. The storm is gone, but its lessons remain. You've learned how to survive the winter. You've learned how to live with the storm, to understand its rhythm and to adapt. And when the next storm arrives, as it surely will, you will be ready. You step back inside the shelter, the warmth of the fire still present, and you sit down feeling a deep sense of connection to everything around you. The storm may be gone, but its lessons have become part of you. The wisdom of your ancestors, the knowledge they passed down, has prepared you not just to survive, but to thrive. The storm is not something to fear. It is part of the world you live in, part of the rhythm of life, and in that understanding you find strength. The storm has left the landscape transformed, but the world outside is beginning to settle into a calm that is almost surreal. The wind has slowed to a gentle breeze, the snow still falling, but in soft, predictable patterns, as though the earth itself is preparing for what's to come. You sit by the fire again, feeling the warmth spread through your body, but there's a strange sense of quiet urgency in the air. The storm, though calm now, has taught you that nature doesn't wait for anyone. It moves in cycles, it shifts and it changes without warning. Your ancestors understood this better than anyone. They lived through the cold winters and the relentless storm not just by enduring them, but by adapting to them. They didn't wait for the seasons to change on their own. They didn't simply react to the elements. They made sure they were always ready, always prepared for the next change. Whether it was the gathering of food or the construction of shelters, their whole way of life was built on the knowledge that winter would come again, and when it did, they had to be ready. Historians have long marvelled at how Native Americans seemed to thrive in the harshest of environments, especially during the deadliest winter storms. Some suggest that this was because of practical survival techniques developed over thousands of years of experience. Others argue that there was a deeper connection to the land, one that transcended practicality and became a spiritual understanding of the world around them. The idea that the land itself could offer guidance, that the earth's rhythms could be read and understood, is one that goes beyond mere survival. It speaks to a profound respect for nature, a belief that survival wasn't just about battling the elements, but understanding how to coexist with them. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you sit by the fire thinking about the different ways your ancestors adapted to the environment. While many people today rely on technology to stay warm, Native Americans found creative solutions that worked with the land itself. For example, some tribes used snow as insulation to build temporary shelters called quinzees. These snow shelters were crafted by piling up snow and packing it down tightly, to create an insulated dome. The snow acted as a natural insulator, keeping the warmth inside while blocking out the cold and wind. This wasn't a shelter built by force or modern equipment. It was built with a deep understanding of the materials around them, using snow itself as a tool for survival. You feel the crackling of the fire, the warmth, providing a stark contrast to the cold that waits just outside your shelter. It's a reminder that even when the storm has passed, the cold still remains. You've learnt that survival is a continuous process, not just something that happens during a single storm. The knowledge passed down through generations has taught you how to live with the land, how to adapt to the environment, and how to endure not just one winter, but all the winters to come. Native Americans didn't just face the cold with courage, they faced it with knowledge and respect. They didn't simply survive the storm, they knew it would come again and they were ready for it. They learned to read the signs, the way the animals acted before a storm, the way the sky darkened, the way the wind shifted direction. They understood that survival wasn't just about physical strength, it was about mental resilience, about being able to predict, to adapt, and to stay calm when everything around you seemed uncertain. As the fire continues to burn, you think about the future. The storm will come again. The snow will return, the wind will howl, and the cold will settle in. But you're no longer afraid. You've learned to live with the storm, not to fear it. You know how to read the land, how to predict the changes in the weather, and how to move with the rhythms of nature. The land has taught you everything you need to know. The storm is no longer an enemy to be fought, but a part of life to be understood. You'll face the next storm not with dread, but with anticipation, knowing that the knowledge your ancestors passed down has prepared you for whatever comes next. Historians still debate whether the deep connection that Native Americans had with the land was purely practical or if it was spiritual. Some argue that their survival was simply the result of centuries of trial and error, a practical adaptation to the environment. Others suggest that this connection went beyond mere survival. It was a worldview that saw humans as caretakers of the earth, living in harmony with it rather than seeking to dominate it. What is clear is that their ability to survive in the harshest conditions wasn't just about brute strength or physical endurance. It was about a deep understanding of the land, the ability to predict the weather, and the wisdom to adapt to the world around them. You feel that same connection now sitting by the fire, the warmth and peace it offers, filling you with a sense of calm. The storm has passed, but the lessons it has taught you remain. You understand now that survival is not about fighting against the world. It's about learning to live with it. The storm may come again, but you will be ready. You've learned how to read the signs, how to adapt, and how to move with the rhythm of nature. And when the next storm hits, you'll be prepared just as your ancestors were. The crackling of the fire becomes a steady rhythm, a comforting presence in the otherwise silent shelter. The storm may be over, but the knowledge of how to live with it stays with you. It's not just about surviving the winter months. It's about living through them, either understanding the patterns of the wind, the snow, and the cold, and using them to guide you. You've learned to read the land, to anticipate the storm, and to adapt to it. You are no longer merely surviving the elements. You are living with them. The fire burns a little brighter, and the warmth seems to envelop you, wrapping you in a sense of peace. The storm may have been fierce, but it has left you stronger. You are no longer just a person enduring the cold. You're a part of the land, part of the cycle of nature, and in that connection you find strength. The storm will come again, but you will face it with the wisdom passed down from your ancestors, ready to live through it, to thrive within it. The night grows deeper, and the fire continues to crackle, the warmth of it filling the shelter with its steady glow. The world outside may be cold and harsh, but inside you have found warmth, comfort, and the knowledge to survive. You are part of this land, part of the storm, and in that understanding you will endure. You are no longer simply surviving the storm, you are learning to live with it, to move with it, and to thrive within it. The storm's aftermath leaves the world in a strange quiet, a tranquil silence that almost feels unnatural after such intensity. The wind is gentler now, a whisper that moves the snow with a soft grace. The air is colder than before, but it's no longer the biting chill that once threatened to freeze you to the bone. Instead, it's the kind of cold that speaks of winter's stillness. a cold that reminds you of the quiet resilience that comes after the chaos. You sit by the fire, letting the warmth settle around you, feeling the steady crackling of the flames as they continue their dance. It's in moments like this, with the storm past and the world around you still, that you realize how much your perspective has shifted. The storm is no longer something to be feared. The wind, though it howls, no longer carries the same power it once did. Instead, it is a part of the landscape, part of the cycle of nature. The storm has come and gone, but in its wake it has left something more lasting, a sense of understanding, a deep awareness of the world around you. Native Americans had this understanding long before modern technology and weather forecasting. They didn't have the luxury of satellite imagery or weather models, but they didn't need them. They had something more powerful than knowledge that was passed down through generations. This wasn't just practical knowledge about how to build shelters or make fires. It was a deep, almost spiritual understanding of the land, the seasons, and the forces of nature. Their ability to survive in the harshest conditions was rooted not just in what they knew, but in how they saw the world. They saw themselves as part of the earth, not separate from it. Nature wasn't an enemy to conquer. It was a partner to work with. They understood that the storm, the cold and the snow were all parts of the natural rhythm, and to survive you had to learn to live within that rhythm. You feel the fire's warmth spread through your body, a welcome contrast to the cold that still waits outside. The storm may have passed, but the winter is far from over. The cold still lingers, but it no longer feels like a threat. You've learned, as your ancestors did, that survival is not about fighting the elements. It's about understanding them, adapting to them, and using their power to your advantage. You know now that the storm is not a battle to be won, it's a challenge to be met with patience, skill and respect. Historians still debate how much of Native American survival was based on learned experience and how much was influenced by a spiritual connection to nature. Some believe that their survival was purely a matter of necessity, honed through centuries of trial and error. Others suggest that their relationship with the land was more philosophical, that it was a belief in the earth's cycles and rhythms that gave them the strength to endure. Regardless of the origin of this connection, it's clear that their ability to live through such harsh winters was tied to something deeper than mere survival instinct. It was about respect, knowledge, and harmony with the natural world. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you reflect on the ways Native Americans adapted to their environment. One of the most remarkable things about their survival strategies was the way they used every part of the land. They didn't just take from nature, they worked with it. For instance, they understood which animals provided the best fur for clothing and which plants offered the most nourishment. They learned how to preserve food for the long winters, but they didn't just store meat and berries. They understood the cycles of the land, when to hunt and when to gather, ensuring that they never took too much. They gave back to the land, respecting the delicate balance that allowed them to thrive. As you sit there warming yourself by the fire, you can feel the weight of that respect. You've learnt that survival isn't just about gathering resources, it's about knowing when to use them and when to conserve them. Your ancestors didn't waste anything. Every part of the animals they hunted, every plant they gathered, was used to its fullest potential. This wasn't just about necessity, it was a way of life, a philosophy that honoured the earth and its gifts. The fire flickers and pops, and you think about the ways your ancestors kept warm during these brutal winters. Their homes, whether they were temporary snow shelters or more permanent dwellings, were designed to provide warmth in the harshest conditions. They understood how to trap heat, how to build walls that kept the cold at bay, and how to position their homes to take advantage of the sun's warmth. They didn't just build shelter, they built homes that were in tune with the land, with the seasons. The roofs of their shelters were angled to let snow slide off, preventing it from building up and collapsing the structure. The walls were constructed with materials that trapped heat, ensuring that the warmth of the fire inside would be enough to keep the cold at bay. You realise that your own shelter is a reflection of this knowledge. The warmth of the fire, the structure around you, it's all designed with the same principles in mind. You didn't just throw together a shelter to survive the storm. You created a space that works with the environment, that takes advantage of the resources available to you. The shelter isn't just protection from the elements, it's a home, a space that connects you to the land and to the lessons that have been passed down through generations. Historians often remark on the ingenuity of Native American shelters and tools, noting that they were designed with an almost intuitive understanding of the environment. They knew how to use the land's materials to create the structures they needed, and they didn't waste anything in the process. This was a culture built on resourcefulness, on knowing how to use what was available to create a life of comfort and survival. They didn't simply survive the winters, they thrived within them. As you sit in the shelter, the fire warming your skin and the world outside quiet and still, you feel the weight of the knowledge that has been passed down to you. The storm may have passed, but the lessons remain. You've learned to read the wind, to understand the snow, to anticipate the storm. You've learned that survival isn't just about physical strength. It's about mental strength, about resilience, about knowing when to act and when to wait, when to take shelter and when to move forward. It's about understanding the rhythm of nature and living in harmony with it. The storm will come again, the wind will howl, the snow will fall and the cold will return. But you know now that you are not just a survivor of the storm, you're a part of it. You understand the land, the weather, and the cycles that govern it. You know that each storm is a challenge, but it is also an opportunity. It's a chance to learn to adapt and to grow stronger. You stand outside for a moment, letting the cold air fill your lungs, feeling the weight of everything you've learned. The storm is still out there, but you're no longer afraid. You're ready for whatever comes next. The knowledge passed down through generations has prepared you. You've learned how to read the land, how to understand the rhythm of the storm, and how to live with it. You are part of the land, part of the cycle, and you know that you are ready for the next challenge. The storm will return, but so will you. And when it does, you will face it with the wisdom of those who came before you, knowing that survival is not just about enduring, it's about living. The storm is still outside, but its intensity has diminished, leaving the land untouched and serene. The wind, which once howled with fury, now whispers gently through the trees. The snow continues its steady fall, softening the edges of the world and creating a quiet stillness that feels almost sacred. Inside your shelter, the fire's warmth embraces you, providing a stark contrast to the cold that lingers outside. It's a gentle reminder that you're safe for now, but the lessons of the storm remain fresh in your mind. You think about the storm's unpredictability and how it mirrors the way life unfolds. Just when you think you have a sense of control, something can shift unexpectedly. The storm's fury teaches you that you must be adaptable, ready to adjust when nature throws its challenges your way. Your ancestors understood this well. They lived with the cycles of the land, moving with the seasons rather than against them. They knew that winter wasn't just something to endure. It was a time to adapt, a time to observe, and a time to learn. Native Americans were masters of adaptation. They didn't merely survive the harsh winters, they thrived within them. Their deep understanding of the natural world allowed them to anticipate the land's shifts, to know when to gather food and when to seek shelter. This knowledge wasn't just about survival, it was about respect. They didn't fight the land, they learned from it. They understood that the storm wasn't their enemy, it was just another part of the cycle, something to respect, something to work with. And in doing so, they found not only survival, but a sense of peace. Scholars have long studied how Native Americans were able to live through such extreme conditions. Some argue that their survival was the result of years of trial and error, a practical response to the challenges of their environment. Others suggest that it was more than just practicality. It was a deeply spiritual connection to the land, a worldview that saw nature as a living entity to which they were intricately linked. Whatever the origin of their knowledge, it is clear that their connection to the land was central to their survival. They didn't see nature as something to dominate, they saw it as something to coexist with. A curious fact comes to mind as you think about this intimate relationship between Native Americans and the land. Many tribes used a unique practice called controlled burns to manage their environment. This technique involved setting small controlled fires in certain areas to clear out underbrush and encourage new growth. While it may seem counterintuitive to use fire to manage the land, it was actually a way to create healthier ecosystems. By burning off old growth, they allowed new plants to flourish, which in turn provided food for wildlife and improved the overall health of the land. This practice wasn't done recklessly. It was a careful, knowledgeable approach to working with the land, using fire not as a destructive force but as a tool for regeneration. As you sit by the fire, you reflect on how your ancestors would have adapted to the land, using every resource at their disposal to survive. The snow outside may be thick and relentless, but inside your shelter you are safe, protected from the elements. You think about the materials your ancestors would have used to build such shelters: animal hides, branches and bark materials that were chosen not just for their availability, but for their effectiveness in providing warmth and protection. Each material had a specific purpose, a role to play in creating a safe space for the people inside. The same went for their clothing. The furs and skins they used were not only a means of warmth, but also a testament to their deep understanding of the land and its resources. They didn't simply take from the earth, they used what it provided with careful consideration, making sure nothing went to waste. You think about how much you've learned in such a short time. The storm, though harsh and unrelenting, has shown you the importance of adaptation. You've learned that survival isn't about fighting against nature. It's about moving with it, understanding its patterns and using those patterns to your advantage. The storm was a test, but it was also a teacher. It taught you how to read the signs of the land, how to predict its changes, and how to respect its power. You're no longer just surviving the storm. You're living with it, becoming part of its rhythm. The fire crackles softly and you feel a deep sense of peace settle in. The storm may still be out there, but you've learned how to endure it. You've learned how to respect it, and when the next storm arrives, you'll be ready. You've learned the lessons your ancestors passed down, lessons about resilience, adaptation, and harmony with the land. They lived through the storms not just by enduring them, but by understanding them, and now you too have learned to do the same. You stand and walk outside, the cool air filling your lungs as you look out at the snow-covered landscape. The storm may have passed, but its lessons remain. You no longer feel fear when you look at the snow, the wind, or the cold. You know these forces are not enemies. They are simply part of the world. The storm has come and gone, but the wisdom it brought is something you carry with you. Historians still debate the depth of the Native Americans' spiritual connection to the land. Some believe their understanding of nature was purely practical, a product of living with the environment for thousands of years. Others suggest that this connection was more profound, a belief that nature was sacred and that survival was about maintaining balance with the earth. Regardless of the origins of their connection, it is clear that their ability to live through the storms, to adapt to the harshest of winters, was rooted in an understanding of nature that went far beyond survival. It was a way of life that respected the earth, the rhythms of the land and the cycles of the seasons. You return to your shelter, the warmth of the fire, a welcome contrast to the cold outside. The storm may have passed, but you know that the cycle will continue. The snow will fall again, the wind will howl once more, and the cold will return. But you are ready for it. You've learned to live with the storm, to respect it, and to adapt to it. The knowledge your ancestors passed down to you has prepared you for whatever challenges lie ahead. You are no longer just surviving. You are thriving. The quiet that follows the storm is profound. The world seems to hold its breath as though it is reflecting on the chaos it has just endured. The wind has slowed to a soft murmur, and the snow continues to fall at a steady pace, blanketing the world in soft layers of white. The cold still lingers in the air, but there is a certain peace in the stillness now, a calm that only comes after a fierce and unpredictable storm. Inside your shelter, the warmth of the fire surrounds you, a constant reminder of the resilience you've learned to embrace. The flames crackle steadily, casting a warm glow across the shelter and pushing back against the cold that presses from the outside. You think about how much has changed in such a short time. What once seemed like an insurmountable force has become something more manageable, something you've learned to understand. The storm that once filled you with dread is no longer an enemy. It is simply a part of the natural world. A challenge that comes with the seasons, a force that demands respect, but not fear. The fire continues to burn its warmth, filling you with a sense of security. But it's not just the warmth that has changed you. It is the knowledge, the understanding that has been passed down through generations. Native Americans didn't just face the harshness of winter storms, they understood them. They didn't just survive the cold, they learned how to live with it. Their survival wasn't just about having the right tools or knowledge of shelter building. It was about seeing the land as part of their being, respecting it, and working with it. The land with its storms and cycles was not something to conquer, it was something to live in harmony with. They knew that winter wasn't something to fear, it was something to prepare for, to respect, and to understand. You've realised that survival isn't just about reacting to the storm, it's about preparing for it, reading the signs before it arrives, and understanding the rhythms of the world around you. Your ancestors had a profound ability to read the land, the wind, the animals, and the sky. They understood when the storm was coming, when it would break, and how long it would last. They didn't just endure, they thrived. They learned from the storm, from the snow, from the cold. They learned to move with it, not against it. This knowledge, this connection to the land, wasn't just about surviving one winter. It was about surviving every winter, every season, and adapting with each change. Historians often marvel at how Native Americans could live so well in such harsh conditions. Some believe that their survival came down to a simple understanding of the environment and the skills passed down over thousands of years. Others argue that this understanding was spiritual in nature, a way of seeing the land as something sacred to be respected and nurtured. Whatever the cause of their success, it's clear that their ability to thrive in the coldest winters was rooted in a deep understanding of the natural world. They weren't just enduring the seasons they were working with them, living in balance with them. A fascinating tidbit crosses your mind as you think back to the techniques your ancestors used to survive. They didn't rely on technology or modern tools. Instead, they used the materials that nature provided. They knew how to craft tools and weapons from stone, bone, and wood. They understood how to fashion clothing from the skins of animals, knowing which parts of the animal were best for warmth and protection. They didn't just use these materials, they respected them. Every part of the animal, every tree, every stone had a purpose, nothing went to waste. They knew that in a world where resources were scarce, efficiency and respect for nature were essential to survival. As you sit by the fire, you think about how much of this knowledge has been passed down. It wasn't just passed down through practical lessons, but through stories. The elders would sit by the fire, passing down the wisdom of survival, not just through words, but through the way they lived. They taught the younger generation how to read the land, how to track animals, how to build shelter, and how to survive the storm. But more importantly, they taught them how to live in harmony with the world around them. Survival wasn't just about making it through the winter. It was about understanding the land, respecting it, and becoming one with it. You think about how different life was back then. They didn't have the luxury of modern conveniences. They didn't have electric heaters, insulated homes, or food deliveries. They had to rely on their own knowledge and the resources around them. Every season brought its challenges, but every season also offered its gifts. Your ancestors learned how to work with the land, to read its signals, to prepare for the coming winter, and to store what they needed to survive. And in return they learned to live with the land, to respect it, and to become a part of its cycle. Historians still argue whether this connection to the land was purely practical, or whether it was spiritual in nature. Some believe that Native American survival techniques were born out of necessity, a result of living in an unforgiving environment. Others suggest that their understanding of nature went beyond survival. It was part of a spiritual connection, a belief that humans were intertwined with the earth. Regardless of how this connection came to be, it is clear that it played a key role in their ability to endure not just in the winter, but in life itself. You sit back and reflect on everything you've learned. The storm may have passed, but it's not just the elements that you've had to face. You've had to face the elements within yourself as well. The fear, the uncertainty, the feeling of being out of control. Those are the real storms, the ones that test your spirit. But just as you've learned to survive the physical storm, you've learned to calm the storm within. You've learned to read the signs of your own mind, to anticipate your fears, and to move with them. You've learned that you don't have to fight your own thoughts or emotions. You can adapt to them, learn from them, and use them to find strength. The fire crackles softly and you can feel its warmth in your chest. The storm outside may still be raging, but inside there's peace. You've learned that survival is not just about enduring the storm. It's about becoming part of it, moving with it, and finding strength in the lessons it teaches. Your ancestors faced these same storms, both external and internal, and they learned to navigate them with grace and wisdom. You have inherited that wisdom and now you carry it forward. As the wind begins to pick up again outside, you think about the next storm. You know it will come just as sure as the seasons change. But you're no longer afraid. You've learnt that the storm is not something to fear. It's a part of life, a part of the cycle. And just like your ancestors before you, you will face it with respect, with understanding, and with the knowledge that you are part of the world around you, not separate from it. The fire continues to burn steadily, casting its warm glow across the shelter. The storm outside rages, but inside there is calm. You are ready for the next challenge, the next lesson, the next storm. The world outside remains in its winter hush, the storm having passed, but leaving its mark on the land. The snow has settled in, covering everything in a soft white blanket that shines faintly under the pale moonlight. The wind is still, but you know it won't stay that way for long. You've learned that nature moves in cycles, that calm moments are always temporary, and the elements are never far from their next shift. But for now, the world feels peaceful, almost suspended in time. The fire inside your shelter crackles softly, its warmth wrapping you in comfort. Yet there is a sense of awareness within you, a quiet understanding that while you are sheltered here, the outside world still demands respect. You can feel it, a quiet hum, an energy that comes from being in tune with your surroundings. Your ancestors understood this connection better than most, seeing themselves not as separate from nature, but as part of its endless cycle. Every tree, every animal, and every snowflake was part of a larger pattern, one that they had learned to read and live with. They didn't just survive the winter storms, they lived in them, moved with them, and used them to their advantage. The harshest storms were not obstacles to be avoided, but rhythms to be understood. They didn't struggle against nature. Instead, they allowed it to guide them, to teach them how to adapt and thrive. This connection to the natural world was something your ancestors carried with them, something that was passed down from generation to generation. The wisdom they left behind was not just practical, it was deeply spiritual, a way of understanding the world that allowed them to live in harmony with the elements. Historians often marvel at how Native Americans managed to live in such harsh climates without the modern comforts we take for granted. Some believe it was simply their knowledge of the land and its resources honed over thousands of years. Others argue that there was something more profound at play, a spiritual connection to the earth that informed their survival practices. Whether it was the result of practicality or spirituality, one thing is clear. Their ability to adapt to the cold, to move with the land, was rooted in an understanding of nature that went far beyond the physical. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you think about how your ancestors used the land to survive. They didn't just rely on shelter and food. They understood the importance of rest and recovery, knowing that the harsh winters could take a toll not only on the body but also on the mind. During the coldest months, many tribes would slow down their activity, resting more often and conserving energy. They didn't rush through the winter. They gave themselves time to reflect, to rest, and to prepare for the coming seasons. It was a practice rooted in wisdom, a way of respecting the rhythms of life and giving the body and mind the rest they needed to endure. You think about how in many ways this mirrors the way you've learnt to cope with the storm. It's not just about enduring. It's about adapting, listening to the signs and pacing yourself. The storm may have been fierce, but you've learned to respect it, to move with it, and to find peace in the quiet moments that come afterward. It's a balance of strength and surrender, a balance that your ancestors understood and practiced every day. You remember the shelter your ancestors would have built, how they designed it not just for warmth, but for ease of living during the coldest months. Their homes were designed to keep the cold out, but they were also spaces that invited connection. The community would gather around the fire, sharing stories, passing down wisdom, and drawing strength from one another. The fire wasn't just a source of warmth, it was a source of connection, a place where the teachings of the elders were shared, and where the next generation learned how to live with the land. You feel that same sense of connection now as you sit by your own fire. The warmth of it surrounds you, but it's more than just the physical heat that comforts you. It's the connection to something deep, to the knowledge of those who came before you, and to the understanding that you are part of something larger. The storm may have passed, but its lessons remain, and you are now ready to face the challenges that lie ahead, not just with strength, but with wisdom and respect. Historians still debate whether Native Americans viewed the winter as something to conquer or something to endure. Some argue that their survival was purely a matter of necessity, a result of living in an unforgiving environment. Others suggest that the connection to nature was spiritual in nature, that survival was tied to a belief that humans were part of the Earth's cycles and that to live in harmony with the land was essential to survival. Regardless of the origins of this connection, it's clear that their ability to thrive in harsh winters wasn't simply about surviving. It was about living with the land, understanding its rhythms, and using them to guide their way of life. You sit back reflecting on everything you've learned. The storm is no longer something to fear. It is simply a part of the cycle, and you are part of that cycle. The wisdom of your ancestors has prepared you not just for surviving the storm, but for thriving in it. You've learned to move with the rhythm of nature, to understand its patterns, and to adapt when necessary. You've learned that survival isn't just about enduring, it's about living in balance with the world around you, finding harmony between your needs and the needs of the earth. The fire crackles again, its warmth comforting you in the stillness of the night. The storm outside may have passed, but you know that others will come, and when they do, you will be ready. You've learned to read the signs, to anticipate the changes in the wind, and to use the storm to your advantage. You're no longer just surviving the storm, you're learning to live with it, to adapt to it, and to find peace in its presence. You step outside once more, feeling the cold air fill your lungs. The world is still, the snow continuing to fall, gently blanketing everything in its quiet embrace. The wind is calm now, and the landscape is peaceful, untouched by the chaos that has just passed. You stand there for a moment, letting the stillness wash over you, feeling the connection to the land, to your ancestors, and to the cycles of life. You are part of this just as they were, and in that connection you find your strength. You return to your shelter, the warmth of the fire welcoming you back. The storm may have passed, but the lessons it has taught you will stay with you. You're not just surviving the winter, you're living with it, understanding it, and finding peace within it. And when the next storm comes, you will face it with the wisdom of those who came before you, ready to move with the rhythm of nature and live in harmony with the world around you. The world outside is still the aftermath of the storm, leaving behind a serene, almost surreal landscape. The snow settles in layers, pristine and untouched, as though the earth has reset itself. The air is fresh and crisp, with a quiet energy that fills your lungs with each breath. The wind, once harsh and unpredictable, has softened into a gentle murmur, as if giving way to the calm that follows a storm. Inside the shelter, the fire continues to crackle its warmth, a stark contrast to the cold outside, a constant reminder of the resilience and wisdom passed down to you from your ancestors. You sit by the fire, reflecting on how much has changed over the course of this storm. The fear and uncertainty you initially felt have given way to understanding. What once seemed like an overwhelming force of nature has now become something you can anticipate and respect. You've come to realize that the storm, while fierce, is just one part of a larger cycle, one that has been repeating itself for millennia. The wind will blow again, the snow will fall again, and the cold will return, but you will be ready. You've learned to move with the storm, to adapt, and to find peace within its rhythm. The wisdom of your ancestors has guided you through this process. They didn't just survive the cold and the storms, They understood the land, its rhythms, and the cycles of nature in a way that allowed them to live in harmony with it. They didn't see the storms as something to fight against, but something to understand and move with. Their survival was not just about enduring the elements. It was about becoming part of them, about recognizing the natural worlds as patterns and using those patterns to thrive. Scholars often debate the reasons behind Native Americans' exceptional ability to live in such harsh climates. Some argue that it was purely the result of thousands of years of experienced trial and error, during which survival techniques were refined and passed down. Others contend that there was something more profound at play, a spiritual connection to the earth that guided their actions and decisions. This connection, whether born from practicality or spirituality, is a key element of their success. It wasn't just about surviving the storms, it was about knowing how to work with them, how to adapt to the land and its cycles. A fascinating observation comes to mind as you think back to how Native Americans used the resources around them to thrive during winter. They didn't just rely on the materials they gathered during the warmer months. They also understood how to use the natural environment in winter to their advantage. For example, the snow itself became a tool for survival. Some tribes would use snow to insulate their shelters, making temporary snow houses called quinzees, which helped keep them warm when the weather was at its harshest. These structures weren't just shelter, they were designed with an understanding of how the snow could be used as insulation, allowing them to live comfortably, even in the dead of winter. This practical knowledge was passed down and refined over generations, having a remarkable ability to adapt to the environment. You think about how your own shelter, though more modern, reflects the same principles your ancestors used. The fire, the materials, the way you've arranged everything, it all reflects a deep understanding of how to use the resources at hand. While you may not need to build a quinzee today, the knowledge of how to stay warm in the coldest moments, how to adapt to the world around you, is just as valuable. The fire burned steadily, providing warmth just as the fire of your ancestors once did, though perhaps in a different form. The lesson is clear: survival is not just about enduring. It's about adapting to the land, understanding the patterns of the seasons and learning to live with them. This is not a lesson in how to build a shelter or make fire, but in how to be part of the world you live in. Nature doesn't wait for you to catch up. It moves at its own pace, and your ancestors learned how to move with it, to flow with the cycles rather than fighting against them. They didn't just survive the storms they used, they respected them and found ways to thrive because of them. Historians still debate the exact nature of the relationship Native Americans had with the land, particularly in terms of spirituality versus practicality. Some say it was the sheer necessity of survival that created such a deep connection to the earth. Others suggest that there was a spiritual element to this relationship, a belief that the land, the animals, and the elements were all part of a larger cosmic cycle that humans had to respect and understand. Regardless of the reason, the connection between the people and the land was critical to their survival. It was this understanding that allowed them not only to weather the worst of the storms, but to do so with respect for the earth itself. You sit back, letting the warmth of the fire soak into your bones, and think about how much you've come to understand. The storm has passed, but its lessons remain woven into the very fabric of the world around you. You've learned how to survive, but more importantly, you've learned how to live. You've learned to read the signs, to listen to the rhythm of the land, and to move with it. You've learned that survival isn't about fighting against the elements. It's about understanding them, respecting them, and finding your place within them. A quirky thought crosses your mind. Your ancestors would have seen the storm not as something random or unpredictable, but as a part of the world's natural cycle. They didn't fear the winter storms. They knew they were coming. They knew how to prepare for them, how to endure, and when to act. And when the storm passed, they didn't just resume life as normal. They used the stillness that followed to reflect a rest and to prepare for the next challenge. This calm after the storm wasn't just a time to relax. It was a time to reconnect with the land, to reset and to adapt for the future. The fire burns low and the quiet of the night settles in around you. The storm is over, but you know that the next one will come. The seasons will change, the storm will return, but you are ready for it. You've learned to live in harmony with the land, to move with the cycles, and to respect the elements that once seemed so intimidating. You're no longer just enduring the storm. You are part of it. You're connected to the rhythms of the earth, to the wisdom passed down through generations, and to the lessons of survival that have kept people like you alive for centuries. The storm will come again, and when it does, you will be ready. The knowledge of your ancestors, the wisdom of the land, and the strength of the earth will guide you through it just as it always has. The storm outside rages a little less fiercely now, but its presence still lingers in the air like the echoes of an argument that's slowly fading into silence. The snow continues to fall, but it's no longer the wild, unpredictable blizzard it once was. Instead, it falls in steady, rhythmic flurries, blanketing the world in a soft, quiet hush. The wind has calmed, but it still carries the remnants of the storm, whispering its way through the trees, bending their branches under the weight of the snow. The cold remains a reminder that winter is far from over, but the peace that follows a storm is undeniable. You sit near the fire, its warmth a welcome contrast to the chill that permeates everything outside. The shelter is still quiet except for the soft crackling of the fire. The storm may have passed, but it's left behind a kind of stillness that feels almost sacred. The world outside may be cold and harsh, but in here, with the fire burning steady, you feel a deep sense of calm. You know, though, that the storm isn't gone. It's just taken a pause, waiting for the right moment to return, and that you realise is exactly how you've learned to live with it. Not by fearing its return, but by preparing for it, learning to anticipate its rhythm and adapt to its demands. The wisdom your ancestors passed down has allowed you to see the storm in a new light. What once seemed like an enemy is now a part of life, a force of nature that must be respected, not fought against. The storm in all its fury is simply a part of the cycle, just as winter itself is. It will pass and another will come. The key is understanding the land, reading the signs, and adapting to what the world throws your way. Native Americans were masters of adaptation. They understood the natural world in a way that went beyond survival. They didn't just live through the winter storms, they made them a part of their lives. Every storm, every shift in the weather was an opportunity to learn to adapt and to grow. They didn't just endure the cold, they understood it, respected it, and used it to their advantage. They learned when to build shelter, when to start fires, and when to gather resources to ensure their survival. They didn't react to the storm, they moved with it, becoming part of its rhythm, part of the natural world. Historians still debate how much of Native American survival strategies were shaped by necessity, and how much by their world view. Some argue that their survival was simply a matter of observation and trial, honed over centuries of living with the land. Others suggest that their deep connection to the earth was spiritual in nature, that they saw themselves as caretakers of the land living in balance with nature's cycles. Either way, their ability to thrive in the face of harsh conditions is undeniable. They didn't see the storm as an obstacle to overcome, they saw it as a part of life, a force to be understood and respected. And in that respect, they found a way to not only survive, but to thrive. A quirky thought comes to mind as you reflect on their relationship with the land. While we often think of winter as a time of hardship, Native Americans recognized it as a time of renewal. It was a time for rest, for reflection, and for preparation. The harshness of winter didn't just challenge them, it provided a time for them to conserve their energy, to reflect on the lessons of the past year, and to prepare for the next season. They didn't rush through the cold months. They used the time wisely, knowing that winter would eventually give way to spring. This cyclical understanding of time of seasons was an essential part of their survival. As the fire burned steadily, you think about the importance of rest. The storm, though it was fierce and relentless, also gave you time to pause, to reflect, and to prepare. You didn't fight the storm. You adapted to it, moved with it, and found ways to make it work for you. Your ancestors knew the importance of this kind of adaptability. They understood that surviving the storm wasn't just about physical endurance. It was about mental resilience, about being able to stay calm and focused even when everything around you seemed uncertain. They knew how to adapt, how to find shelter, and how to use the storm to their advantage. You feel the warmth of the fire as it surrounds you, and you realise that this too is a part of the lesson. The warmth isn't just physical, it's a reminder of the resilience that burns within you. The fire keeps you alive, not just by providing heat, but by offering a place of reflection, a place of community. Just as your ancestors gathered around the fire to share stories and pass down wisdom, you too have gathered around this fire to reflect on everything you've learned. The storm may have passed, but the lessons it carried with it are lasting, and you will carry them forward just as those before you did. The wind stirs again outside, but it no longer seems threatening. You've learned to read it to understand its rhythm. The storm is a part of life, not something to be feared. It will come again, but now you know how to prepare for it. You've learned the patterns, the signs, and how to live with the land, not against it. You've learned that the storm is just another phase in the cycle of nature. You are part of that cycle. When the next storm comes, you will be ready. You will move with it, not fight against it. You will learn from it, adapt to it, and use it to your advantage. Historians often wonder how Native Americans could live so closely with the land without the benefits of modern technology. Some suggest that their survival was due to sheer necessity and accumulated knowledge passed down through generations of trial and error. Others believe that their connection to the earth was spiritual, that they saw themselves as part of the land rather than separate from it. Either way, what is clear is that their survival was about more than just the ability to build shelter or find food. It was about understanding the rhythm of nature, respecting it, and learning how to live with it. You sit back watching the fire as it continues to burn and feel the connection between you and the generations that have come before you. The storm may have passed, but the lessons it has taught you will remain with you. You've learned that survival isn't just about enduring, it's about moving with the rhythms of nature, respecting the cycles and finding strength in the challenges that life brings. You're no longer simply surviving the storm. You're living with it, adapting to it, and using it to grow stronger. The storm will come again, the wind will howl, the snow will fall, and the cold will return, but you are ready for it. You've learned to read the land to understand the rhythm of the weather, and to move with the cycles of nature. The storm is not something to fight against. It's a part of life, and you are part of it. The wisdom of your ancestors has prepared you for this. You are no longer simply enduring the storm. You're living with it, thriving within it, and finding peace in its rhythm. The calm after the storm settles over the landscape, and the air has a crisp quality that feels refreshing, as though the world has been reset. The snow still falling gently covers the earth in an even layer of white, making the world appear both vast and serene. The wind, once fierce and cold, has slowed to a whisper, leaving behind only a faint murmur as it brushes against the branches. You sit by the fire, watching its steady flames, the warmth radiating through the shelter, a contrast to the chill that still lingers outside. In this quiet moment, you reflect on the lessons learned through the storm. What was once intimidating and a force to be reckoned with now feels like a challenge that has been overcome. You've learned that the storm isn't something to fear. It is part of the rhythm of life, a natural cycle that will return again. But each time it comes, you'll be more prepared for it. The storm will never completely lose its power, but you've learned how to move with it, how to adapt to its patterns, and how to find peace in the chaos. The storm has taught you that survival is not just about enduring hardship. It is about using what the land provides to your advantage. Native Americans throughout history didn't just survive in the harshest of winters. They learned to thrive in them not because they were stronger than the storms, but because they understood how to live with them. They respected the elements, the snow, the wind and the cold, and used their knowledge of the land to anticipate changes in the weather. They read the signs in the sky, in the trees, and in the behaviour of the animals. It wasn't just about surviving the storms, it was about understanding them, living in harmony with them, and using them to guide their actions. Historians continue to explore how Native Americans lived so closely with the natural world. Some argue that their survival was the result of thousands of years of trial and error, an accumulation of knowledge that allowed them to adapt to their environment. Others suggest that their deep connection to nature was spiritual in nature, that the earth was viewed as a living entity and survival depended on living in harmony with it. Whether the knowledge was practical or spiritual, what is clear is that their understanding of the land was essential to their survival. They didn't see nature as an obstacle to overcome. They saw it as a partner in life, something to be respected and learned from. A quirky thought comes to mind as you sit by the fire, recalling the practical survival techniques used by your ancestors. One of the most remarkable things about their way of life was their resourcefulness. They used every part of the animals they hunted, ensuring that nothing went to waste. Bones were turned into tools and weapons, the hides into clothing and shelter materials, and the meat was carefully preserved for the cold months. It wasn't just about taking what you needed. It was about using everything with respect, ensuring that the resources were utilized to their fullest potential. The ability to use every part of the animal, every tree, every rock speaks to the deep understanding they had of their environment. They knew how to take what nature gave them and turn it into something that would help them survive. As you sit in the shelter, you feel the warmth of the fire and the sense of peace that comes with understanding. The storm outside, with all its fury and unpredictability, is no longer something to fear. It is simply another part of the land, another part of the cycle of life that you've learned to navigate. Your ancestors did not face the winter storms with dread. They faced them with knowledge, with respect, and with a deep understanding of the land. They did not try to control nature. They worked with it, adapting to the cycles and rhythms that dictated their survival. You realize that survival is not just about facing the physical aspects of a storm. It is about mental resilience, about learning to stay calm, to observe and to adapt. It's about knowing that the storm will eventually pass, but that while it's here, you must move with it. You have learned that there is peace, even in the midst of chaos. The fire you sit beside is a symbol of that peace. It offers warmth and light, just as the knowledge passed down from your ancestors offers guidance. You have learned to survive not just because you are strong, but because you have learned to live with the world around you. Historians often marvel at how Native Americans managed to live through such harsh conditions without the technology and tools we take for granted today. Some suggest that their survival was a result of a deep spiritual connection to the land, a belief that they were part of a larger cycle, and that survival was a matter of respect and balance. Others suggest that their success was purely practical, built on knowledge passed down through generations of trial and error. Whatever the origin of their knowledge, it is clear that their survival was not just a matter of physical endurance. It was about understanding the world, reading the signs, and adapting to the land. Their success wasn't about conquering nature, it was about learning to live in harmony with it. You think back to the lessons your ancestors passed down, the stories shared around the fire, the wisdom passed on in the quiet moments of reflection. These lessons weren't just about building shelter or making food. They were about understanding how to move through the world, how to survive not just one storm, but every storm that life throws your way. You've learned that survival is not about brute force. It is about knowledge, patience, and understanding. It is about learning how to live with the storm, not against it. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind as you think about the shared experiences of your ancestors. When they gathered around the fire during the winter months, they didn't just share stories. They shared knowledge of how to endure, how to adapt, and how to make use of every part of the land. But there was also a deeper message embedded in those stories, a message about living in balance with nature, about understanding that everything is interconnected. The fire wasn't just a source of warmth, it was a symbol of the community, of the strength that comes from working together, of the resilience that comes from sharing knowledge and supporting one another. You feel that same sense of community now as you sit by your own fire. The storm outside may be fierce, but inside you are safe. You have the wisdom passed down to you, and with that wisdom comes a sense of peace. The storm may return, but you know you're ready. You have learned to read the signs, to understand the rhythms of nature, and to adapt to whatever challenges come your way. You are no longer simply surviving the storm. You are living with it, thriving within it, and finding peace in its presence. The fire continues to crackle its warmth, a constant reminder that you are prepared for whatever comes next. The storm will come again, and when it does, you will face it with the knowledge and strength that have been passed down to you. You will not fight the storm. You will move with it, understand it, and use it to guide you. You are part of the cycle of life, and with that understanding you will thrive no matter what the storm brings. The storm has finally loosened its grip on the land, leaving behind a world wrapped in silence. The air is crisp, but it no longer bites with the same fierceness. The snow falls gently now, a soft, steady covering that blankets the earth, turning the world into a place of calm. You sit by the fire watching the flames dance as they provide warmth against the lingering cold. It's moments like these after the storm has passed when you can truly appreciate the stillness and the peace that follows. But in the back of your mind you know that this quiet is only temporary. The land, just like the weather, moves in cycles, and soon enough the storm will return. You've come to understand that the storm, though it felt like an adversary at times, is simply part of nature's rhythm. It arrives, it rages, and it passes just like everything else. The challenge lies not in fighting against it, but in learning how to move with it, how to anticipate it, and how to use its force to your advantage. Your ancestors knew this better than anyone. They didn't fear the storms, they adapted to them, lived with them, and in many ways they thrived because of them. They didn't try to control nature. They worked with it, lived within its rhythms, and used their understanding of the land to guide their way. This deep connection to the earth, to the land and its cycles, is something that has been passed down through generations. Native Americans didn't just survive the storms, they understood them. They observed the land, the animals, and the sky, learning to read the signs that indicated a change in the weather. They knew when the storm was coming, how long it would last, and when it would pass. They didn't rely on technology or modern tools. They relied on their connection to the world around them, on their deep knowledge of the land. Historians have long marvelled at the profound understanding Native Americans had of their environment. Some argue that their survival was the result of years of practical knowledge learned through observation and experience. Others suggest that this knowledge was more than just practical. It was spiritual, rooted in a belief that humans were intrinsically connected to the earth. This connection, whether based on practicality or spirituality, was key to their survival. They didn't just endure the storms. They used their understanding of nature to move through them, to survive them, and to find peace within them. A curious fact comes to mind as you sit by the fire. Native America understood that their survival wasn't just about gathering food or building shelter. It was about understanding the cycles of nature. They knew that the cold of winter wasn't just something to endure, but something to work with. They used the stillness of winter to rest, to reflect, and to prepare for the coming spring. They didn't rush through the seasons. They moved with them, adapting to each one, using the natural rhythms of the world to guide their actions. You think about how your ancestors would have spent this time after the storm had passed. They would have rested, of course, but they would also have taken the time to reflect, to share stories, and to ensure that they were prepared for whatever came next. They would have used the quiet moments of winter to gather strength for the challenges that would arise when the weather warmed. They knew that the storm would pass, but the winter would continue and they would need to be ready for it. This lesson, the importance of preparation and reflection, is something you carry with you. The storm may have passed, but you are not simply resting. You're preparing just as your ancestors did. You're reflecting on what you've learned, on how far you've come, and on the wisdom passed down through generations. The storm is no longer something to fear. It is simply a part of life, a part of the cycle that has been repeating for millennia. And with that understanding you find strength. You think about the shelters your ancestors would have built, how they constructed their homes, not just for warmth, but for a sense of community. The fire was the heart of the home, a place where stories were shared, lessons were passed down, and the bond between people and the land was strengthened. They didn't just build shelter from the elements, they built a space where they could come together, reflect and share the knowledge that had been passed down to them. The fire wasn't just a source of warmth, it was a symbol of resilience, of the connection between the past, present and future. As you sit by your own fire, you realize that you are part of this same cycle. You may not live in the same world your ancestors did, but the lessons they learned, the knowledge they passed down are still with you. You are no longer simply surviving the storm. You are living with it, understanding it and adapting to it. The storm will come again, but you are ready. The wisdom of the land passed down through generations has prepared you for whatever challenges lie ahead. Historians continue to debate whether the connection Native Americans had to the land was primarily a survival tactic or something more profound, something spiritual. Some argue that it was a practical necessity, a way of life that emerged out of the need to survive in a harsh environment. Others believe that their deep connection to nature was rooted in a spiritual understanding of the earth as a living, breathing entity. Regardless of the origin of this connection, one thing is clear: it played a vital role in their survival. They didn't just live on the land, they were part of it. You stand up and step outside, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. The world outside is still the snow, glistening softly under the light of the moon. The storm may have passed, but you know that it will come again, and when it does, you will be ready. You have learned to live with the storm, to respect its rhythm, and to use the land's natural cycles to guide you through it. The world may be cold, but you are warm. The storm may rage again, but you have learned that you don't have to fight against it. You are part of it, part of the cycle of life, and in that connection you find peace. The fire inside your shelter burns steadily, and you know that the storm, though it will return, will never again overwhelm you. You've learned how to move with it, how to understand it, and how to live in harmony with the world around you. The storm, now a distant memory, leaves the world blanketed in a quiet that feels almost surreal. The wind has softened to a gentle breeze, and the snow continues to fall steadily, covering everything in a soft, pristine layer. The world seems at rest, and though the cold still lingers, it no longer feels as oppressive as it once did. You sit by the fire, letting its warmth soak into your skin, and think about how much has changed since the storm first arrived. The fear you initially felt has been replaced with understanding. What once seemed like an uncontrollable force has become something you can read and anticipate. You've learned that the storm, while fierce and unpredictable, is simply a part of nature's rhythm. It comes, it goes, and in its wake you are left with the lessons it brought. The storm no longer holds the same power over you. You no longer see it as something to battle, but something to move with, something to learn from. Your ancestors too lived through the storm, though their storms were much harsher. They didn't just survive the elements, they lived with them. They didn't fight against nature, they respected it. They understood that nature's rhythms, though unpredictable at times, were not enemies to conquer. They were forces to be worked with, forces that could teach you the ways of survival if you knew how to listen. The storm for them was just another part of life's cycle, something to anticipate, to adapt to, and ultimately to understand. Historians often debate how Native Americans were able to thrive in such extreme conditions, especially without the technology we take for granted today. Some argue that their survival was a product of practical knowledge honed over thousands of years through trial and error. Others believe that their deep connection to the land went beyond the practical and into the spiritual, that they saw themselves as stewards of the earth, living in balance with the world around them. Whatever the origins of their knowledge, one thing is certain: their understanding of the land and the cycles of nature allowed them to not only survive but to thrive in some of the harshest climates imaginable. You think about the knowledge your ancestors passed down, the lessons they learned from the land. They didn't just understand how to build, shelter, hunt and gather. They understood the land's rhythms, when to rest, when to gather resources, when to prepare for the storm. They knew that winter wasn't just something to endure. It was a time of reflection, of preparing for the coming months, and of using the calm after the storm to reset and refocus. They didn't rush through winter, they worked with it, adapted to it, and used its stillness to their advantage. A curious thought crosses your mind as you think about the way your ancestors adapted to their environment. It wasn't just about using what was available to survive, it was about understanding the value of what they had. They knew that nature's resources were precious and they treated them with respect. They didn't waste anything. Every part of the animal was used: its skin for clothing, its bones for tools, its meat for food. They knew that each resource had a purpose and they used everything to its fullest extent. This wasn't just practical knowledge, it was a way of life, a philosophy that honoured the earth and its gifts. As you sit by the fire, you think about how your own survival depends on the lessons your ancestors passed down. You may not face the same challenges they did, but you still rely on the same wisdom, the wisdom of patience, respect and adaptability. The storm may have passed, but you know another one will come, and when it does, you will be ready. You have learned to read the signs, to understand the land's rhythms, and to use what you have at your disposal to survive. You've learned to move with the storm, to embrace its challenges, and to find peace in its unpredictability. The wind begins to pick up again, a reminder that the storm is never far behind. But instead of feeling dread, you feel a sense of calm. You have learned that the storm is not your enemy. It is simply part of life's cycle, a rhythm to be respected and understood. You've come to understand that survival is not just about enduring. It's about living with the land, moving with its rhythms and using its forces to guide your actions. Historians still argue over how much of Native American survival was based on necessity, and how much was shaped by their spiritual connection to the land. Some say that their knowledge of nature was a matter of practicality developed over time through the need to survive in an unforgiving environment. Others believe that their connection to the earth went beyond the practical and into the spiritual. That survival was not just about physical strength, but about maintaining harmony with the world around them. Regardless of where that connection came from, it is clear that their survival depended on understanding the land, respecting its rhythms, and adapting to its ever-changing forces. You feel the warmth of the fire as it continues to crackle, the flames flickering and dancing in the hearth. The storm outside may be growing stronger, but inside you are calm. You've learnt to read the signs, to understand the rhythm of nature, and to adapt to the ever-changing world around you. You've learned that the storm, though powerful, is not something to fear. It is a part of life, a force to be understood and respected. And you, like your ancestors, are ready for whatever comes next. The fire crackles again and the wind howls outside, but you feel no fear. The storm is a part of you now, just as it was part of your ancestors. You understand its rhythm, its patterns and its lessons. You no longer see it as something to fight. You see it as something to learn from, something to adapt to, and something to respect. The storm will pass, and when it does, you will emerge stronger, wiser, and more connected to the land than ever before. The storm has faded into the background, leaving behind the stillness of a world that has found its balance again. The wind now whispers no longer the fierce howl it once was, and the snow, to know though still falling, has softened into a peaceful flurry. The world outside is tranquil, almost untouched, and as you sit by the fire, the warmth of the flame seems to draw you closer, offering a comfort that stretches far beyond the physical. It's in this stillness that you realise just how much you've come to understand. The storm, which once felt so unpredictable and terrifying, is now simply a part of life, a rhythm in the natural world, and with that realisation comes a profound sense of peace. You've learned that survival is not just about enduring what the storm throws at you. It's about moving with it, understanding its patterns, and using what it offers to your advantage. The wind, once violent, is now something you know how to anticipate. The snow, once a barrier, is something you've learned to read. The cold, once unforgiving, has become a companion, one that you respect rather than fear. This transformation in how you view the elements isn't just a result of time passing. It's the wisdom passed down to you, the knowledge that your ancestors carried with them through every storm, every season, and every change in the land. The fire in front of you crackles softly, its warmth a reminder of how much you've adapted, how much you've learned. You're no longer just surviving the storm, you're living through it. And the wisdom of your ancestors has prepared you to thrive, not just endure. You've come to understand that the elements are not your enemies. They are forces to be respected, to be lived with. You've learned to embrace the challenges they bring, knowing that each storm, each shift in the seasons is just another part of the cycle that has been unfolding for eons. Native Americans didn't just survive in the cold, they thrived in it. They lived through the harsh winters not by fighting the elements, but by working with them. They learned to read the signs that the land offered to anticipate the storm and to adapt to its rhythm. They knew when to seek shelter and when to venture out. They understood the cycles of nature and lived in harmony with them. It wasn't just about surviving the cold nights or the biting winds, it was about living in balance with the land, respecting its rhythms and using the resources it provided to ensure survival. Historians still discuss the reasons behind Native Americans' success in surviving the harshest winters. Some argue that their survival was purely practical, shaped by the need to adapt to an unforgiving environment. Others suggest that there was a deeper spiritual connection to the land, a worldview that saw humans as part of nature, not separate from it. Whatever the origin of this understanding, it is clear that their survival didn't just depend on the physical tools they had at their disposal. It depended on their deep connection to the land, their ability to read its signs, and their respect for the forces that shape their world. They didn't just endure the storm, they lived with it, learned from it, and used it to guide their way. As you sit by the fire, you feel the weight of the lessons that have been passed down to you. The storm may have passed, but its teachings remain with you. You've learnt that survival is not just about being strong, it's about being adaptable, being in tune with the land and understanding that nature's challenges are not obstacles to be feared, but opportunities to be embraced. The storm will come again, and when it does, you will be ready. You have learned how to anticipate its arrival, how to read the signs it leaves behind, and how to adapt your actions accordingly. The storm is no longer something to resist. It is something to move with, to live within, and to learn from. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you think about how your ancestors used every part of the land, making the most of what nature provided. They didn't just build shelters to protect themselves from the cold, they designed them to work with the land. The roofs of their dwellings were often built at angles that allowed the snow to slide off, preventing dangerous accumulations. The walls were made from materials that insulated against the cold, keeping the warmth of the fire inside and the chill of winter outside. They used every resource with purpose and respect, ensuring that nothing went to waste. Every part of the animal, every piece of wood, every grain of food had a role to play in their survival. You think about how much of this knowledge is still with you, passed down through generations. The wisdom to use what you have, to respect the resources at your disposal, is something you carry forward. The shelter you've built, the fire you've tended to, and the lessons you've learned are all a testament to the resilience of those who came before you. You've adapted to the storm just as they did, and you've learned to move with it, to live in harmony with it. The fire continues to crackle softly, and the world outside remains still. The storm has passed, but its lessons will stay with you. You've learnt that survival is not just about fighting against the elements. It's about understanding them, respecting them, and adapting to their rhythms. Your ancestors didn't fear the storm. They respected it, lived with it, and found strength in its presence. You too have learned to do the same. The next storm may come with its own challenges, but you know you will face it with the wisdom of those who came before you. Historians often reflect on how Native Americans' connection to the land was rooted in both practical knowledge and spiritual beliefs. Some suggest that their deep understanding of nature was a result of practical necessity, shaped by centuries of living in an unforgiving environment. Others argue that their connection to the earth was spiritual, a belief that humans were part of the natural world and that survival depended on maintaining balance with it. Regardless of the origins of this knowledge, it is clear that their success in surviving the harshest winters wasn't just about surviving, it was about living in harmony with the land, adapting to its rhythms, and respecting its power. The fire's warmth continues to spread, and you sit there in quiet reflection. The storm may have passed, but you know another one will come. The world will continue to change, and the rhythms of nature will continue to move. But you are no longer simply surviving the storms. You are living with them, learning from them, and finding peace in their presence. The wisdom of your ancestors has prepared you for this, and when the next storm arrives, you will be ready. As the fire continues to crackle softly, you feel a deep sense of calm settle over you. The storm is now a distant memory, and the world outside, while still cold, seems peaceful. The snow falls gently, the wind whispers through the trees, and everything is quiet as though the earth itself is taking a moment to rest. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the steady warmth of the fire, the sound of the wind far off, and the quiet hum of the world. It feels like everything is in its place, moving as it should, and you are a part of it. The lessons of the storm are still fresh in your mind, but now they no longer feel like something you need to struggle against. You've learned how to move with the world, how to understand the rhythm of the seasons, and the forces that shape them. The storm, once something fierce and unpredictable, is now a part of the natural cycle, a cycle that you are a part of. In its passing, you found a sense of peace, a quiet understanding that you are in harmony with the world around you. The fire, though gentle, still burns brightly, offering warmth, comfort, and light. The cold will come again, as it always does, but you know that you will face it with a sense of calm, knowing that the storm is just a part of the land's rhythm. You've learnt that survival is not about fighting the world. It's about understanding it, moving with it, and finding peace in its presence. The storm may return, but now, with the wisdom of those who came before you, you will embrace it, adapt to it, and live through it with the same resilience that has carried people through generations. Now, as the world outside settles into its quiet, you rest feeling ready for whatever comes next.